Welcome to the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians May 2022 board meeting. My name is Dr. Carol Mountain and I'm the board president. I would like to call this meeting to order at 9:05 a.m. First, some housekeeping information on how this meeting will be conducted. This meeting is being held in person at 2005 Evergreen Street in Sacramento on Friday, May 20, 2022. If we need a motion, I will call for a motion and any board member can raise their hand for recognition to make or second a motion. I will take a roll call vote for each motion. We will take public comment on each agenda item. Members of the public who request to speak will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and you will be notified when you have 30 seconds remaining. Your name is not necessary, but please indicate how you would like us to identify you. For the sake of efficiency, the executive officer may respond directly to public comment or defer to the appropriate staff person or counsel as appropriate. For any questions directed to board members, I will either answer the question or direct it to the board member as appropriate. I will now do an alphabetical roll call to establish quorum. For the record, I would like to note that board members Adrian Luce and Nellie Needless are absent and excused from today's meeting. Taisha Brown.
This way. Present.
Thank you. Alita Carpenter.
Present.
John Durking.
Present.
Abraham Hill.
Present.
Ken Maxey.
Present.
Clara Rooks.
Present.
And I'm Carol Mountain. Based on the roll call, we have a quorum. Item 2, Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Hill, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And now Ms. Yamaguchi will introduce the board staff.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mountain. First of all, welcome everybody. It's so nice to see human beings in an audience where we're going to be re-socializing ourselves. Oh, and one other housekeeping note. If you are presenting today, we would like you to come to one of the chairs and microphones up in front, please. Now, our staff, of course, our AEO, of course, Vicki Lyman, our Enforcement Chief, Antoinette Wood, our SNEC, Marie Cordero, managers Jay Prouty, Shelley Brown, our Legend Reg Specialist, Doris Pierce, our NECs, Beth DeYoung, Jessica Gomez, Judith McLeod, Cindy Fairchild, Charlene De La Rosa, and Faith Silverman. And we brought, as a special treat, a big old pack of our licensing team. So we've got our SPT2s, Michael Hall and Zeb Brookman. And let me see if I can do this correctly and not squint too badly. We've got Nelson, we've got Doris, we've got Isabel, and we've got, that's all of them, right? Okay. And just for a treat, because I need to do this, could you guys stand up? Welcome, everybody. This is, I'm making a thing of this because when we were able to meet regularly before in person, we would, every time we were in Sacramento, ask the teams to send the staff, at least a handful of their teams, over to meet the board members to say hello, because I think it's really important that the staff sees the board in action, and I think it's even more important that the board members see the staff who work so hard every day to do the work of this board. So anyways, thanks everybody. I'm glad to see you all. Dr. Mountain?
Thank you, Ms. Yamaguchi. We will now do item 4, acceptance of the council. I'm sorry. Council, will you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenneth Swenson, General Counsel for the board. Joining us later will be Christy Shields, Regulatory Counsel.
Thank you so much. We will now move on to item 4, acceptance of the minutes from the February 18, 2022 and April 7, 2022 board meetings. We have minutes from our board meetings on February 18 and April 7, 2022 to approve. These have been included in the packets and are posted online. The links to the YouTube videos of each board meeting are printed on this agenda. Can I have a motion to approve and a second for the February 18, 2022 minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? With no discussion or questions from the board, are there any public comments? Seeing no public comment, I will do a roll call and establish who is in favor, opposed, or abstained. Ms. Brown?
Aye.
Ms. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. It passes unanimously. The motion to approve the February 18, 2022 minutes carries by unanimous vote. Can I have a motion to approve and a second for the April 7, 2022 minutes?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions from the board? Seeing no discussion or questions, any public comment? With no public comment, I will do a roll call and establish who is in favor, opposed, or abstains. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. The motion to approve the April 7, 2022 minutes carries by unanimous vote. We need to take the next item out of order. At this point, we will take up item 7, board update from the DCA. We have a special DCA update today. Ms. Kimberly Kirchmeier, the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, is here. Thank you, Director Kirchmeier.
Good morning. Doing this electronically today, so we'll see how it goes. I'm used to paper, so this is a tough one for me. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Chair Mountain, Executive Officer Yamaguchi, and all of the members. Just thank you so much for having me here today. When Miss Yamaguchi called me and actually went through Carrie and said, hey, would you come to our board meeting? I'm like, yes, we're back to board meeting. So I'm very excited to be here and to be able to present before you today. Before I get started, I do want to just take a minute to thank Miss Yamaguchi and all of her staff for the hard work they've done over the last 2 years. I think, it's been a time of change. It's been a time of, tumultuousness, I think. That's a word. Just a time of where people have had to be flexible and, to take individuals in a very short time and change their whole worlds upside down and still continue to do the work that's so important to the consumers and the licensees of California is something that is noteworthy. And every day I'm so thankful to work for DCA and for such hardworking employees. So had to say that first. So I want to provide a few update items and then also let you know of some very important personnel changes for the Department of Consumer Affairs. So with that, I'm just going to start out talking about the Open Meeting Act legislation. So as you are all probably aware, due to the expiration of the executive order on April 1st, all board meetings had to return to working in accordance with all aspects of the King Open Meeting Act. So including publicly noticing all meeting locations where board members are located. And for members who were actually appointed during COVID, it's kind of like, what do I have to do? So we're trying to get everybody back into that mode right now. There is legislation, AB 1733, that's authored by Quirk, that would actually permanently allow board and committees to meet remotely while also providing both virtual and physical options for members of the public to participate. Unfortunately, as you probably know, this bill was not heard in policy committee before the deadline. However, if the board did take a position on this legislation, it's still helpful to share that information with the authors and the committees. Please be sure to send a copy of your position letter to Jennifer Simoes, who's our Deputy Director of Leg Affairs. She can help facilitate dissemination of the position. And then likewise, please advise Deputy Director Simoes of any issues your board has, such as meeting quorum, now that you're returning to in-person meetings, because those are all other reasons that, we've had board meetings actually right now that, members have tested positive. So, we've had issues with getting there. We've had to have a couple late-minute cancellations. So we're just trying to explain the difficulties of going back to in-person meetings. Also, we've recently shared and distributed to all board and committee members guidelines and requirements to adhere to when conducting in-person meetings. In some, this communication addressed things like requirements for meetings under the Bagley-King Open Meeting Act, making sure we are adhering to local public health guidelines at a meeting location, face coverings, vaccination verification, and then obviously testing. DC has also shared guidance and tips from the California Health and Human Services Agency on how to reduce the spread of COVID-19 at in-person meetings. And if you've not done so, really encourage you to go out and review these documents that we send out. Additionally, although state guidance has relaxed mandatory face coverings, the Department of Public Health strongly recommends that individuals continue to mask indoor settings, and we've shared signage that you can post if you'd like to at your meetings. And then also, as you prepare for upcoming meetings, please be aware of changing public health guidance. And remember that as state representatives, we're all expected to adhere to state and local orders while carrying out our duties. And I think as the numbers begin to rise, I think this is something that we may have to see, depending on what the location you're going to be holding your meetings in, what those actually are. So we'll be following that, giving guidance to the boards and kind of walking everyone through that. We're also going to be administering surveys until further notice to capture and track the costs and attendance for all meetings since April 1st. We're going to demonstrate the benefits of conducting remote meetings as allowed under the prior executive order. We've distributed surveys to all the boards and bureaus, and we really ask that these be completed within 30 days after each meeting is held. And should you have any questions, please just reach out. We're looking at things like, how much does it cost to have all of the members come, how much attendance is there, and are people still attending remotely as well. Whether meeting remote or in person, we want to help keep your board fully seated with excellent members and diverse voices. And currently I know that this board has 2 vacancies, an LVN and a Psych Tech appointment, which are both governor appointments. If there's interest in advertising for vacancies, DCA Communication Team has actually recently released a new communications toolkit to assist boards with member recruitment, and it's available in multiple languages. Board members are also encouraged to really visit the board member resources on DCA's homepage to apply for an appointment. So if you know of anyone that is interested in being a board member, please reach out to them. Please provide those names to our Board and Bureau Relations Unit. We really are looking for good members for all of the boards. We're also pleased to announce the inaugural report of the Enlightened licensing project. It's now available and it was distributed to all boards and bureaus on Friday, May 13th. So this innovative and collaborative project started to streamline and enhance licensing processes by utilizing the knowledge and expertise of subject matter experts within DCA boards and bureaus. This project is very near and dear to my heart. This was something when we first came in, we thought, we really want to share best practices amongst the boards and bureaus. So the process we went through, we actually took one board. We went to the Board of Registered Nursing. They were willing to do this. And so we actually had subject matter experts from all of the boards. Actually, electronic and WebEx and Teams was perfect for this because we could have a lot of individuals on the phone at this meeting. And they walked through their licensing processes while subject matter experts went through and said, hey, why do you do it that way? Or is there a better way to do it? Or our board does it this way, you should try this. So we've released the report. We came out with about 30 recommendations. Our 2 co-chairs for this project are actually executive officers, have been working for the state and for DCA for a very long time. So their recommendations were very valuable. So we're really excited about the report, and it is released. We're going to be sharing it. It hasn't gone out to all board members. It's going to be going out. And we're also going to be holding a brown bag to walk the boards through those changes, because sometimes when you read it, it's a little bit different than hearing it and explaining it, and with licensing subject matter experts as well to hear those items. And our hope is that other boards will be able to make changes just by hearing what happened at one board. But we are going to be looking at other boards to be walking through their licensing processes as well. And then our next thing that we're going to be working on is Enlightened enforcement process. So we have a board that we're going to be going out doing the same thing, walking through the enforcement process, because again, what we're trying to find are efficiencies. We want to be able to license individuals as quickly as possible and take action and take discipline for those where it's warranted as quickly as possible, and that's what we're trying to get to the end of. We've also released a new Board and Bureau Relations newsletter, so that's going to be going out every quarter. It goes out to all board members, so if you didn't receive it, please let us know, because we might have a wrong email address for all of you. But this is just really a way to keep in communication with all of the board members. We send a weekly email to President Mountain and the Vice President, but we don't get out to all board members, so we're going to be doing that just to keep everyone up to date. So now our sad announcements. Just recently, our Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, probably someone you've all heard from before, Carrie Holmes, she's actually going to be leaving the department. I know, we're so sad. So her last day was May 13th, actually, and so we're going to be filling that position. And then Brianna Miller, who you may also have heard from, she is one of our program managers. She actually is going to be leaving in June. So we have 2 vacancies in that spot. It just ended up, timing was really bad. And so Carrie went on to really just raise her children, and we're so proud of her for doing that. And Brianna's going on to a position where she loves. So we're sad to see them go, but we'll be filling those positions. In the meantime, if any board members have questions, please reach out to Christine Lally or myself. Both of us are available and happy to help. We have filled some other key positions, though, at DCA, and I'm really happy to announce them. So Terrence Brass has actually joined DCA as the Chief of the Division of Investigation on March 28th. As the Chief, he leads the team responsible for providing investigative services to DCA boards and bureaus, and I know he works a lot with Ms. Yamaguchi and his staff does, and her team. And then additionally, Dadong Prihati actually was selected to serve as the department's internal audits chief, also effective March 28th. In that role, he leads the audit efforts to provide independent and consulting services designed to add value and improve department operations. Then lastly, and this is one of our really exciting hires, Tanya Corcoran began serving as the department's first compliance and equity officer. In her role, she oversees DCA's Solid Training and Planning, Organizational Improvement Office, Equal Employment Opportunity Office, and our Internal Audits Office. She was appointed to spearhead this department under the Compliance and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion strategy for DCA. And then it's exciting with her hire, she formed our first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work group. It's currently comprised of just department leaders, but we're looking to hire or bring in also executive officers into that to work on internal and external activities. And one of the biggest things we're working with is the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. So that's our agency that's over DCA and over the boards and bureaus. And they actually have an internal government work group that we're working with them on. One area that we feel that will contribute to external opportunities is the implementation of workforce and demographic licensee data sharing between DCA and the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. So it's called HCI. And both of these departments are going to be working together to implement new data collection that begins July 1st of 2023 of this year. And then finally, just as a reminder, board members that were hired recently or reappointed recently need to attend our board member orientation training. We're going to be giving that on June 15th is our next one, and then October 12th after that. So we want to make sure you have to take it within a year of your appointment or reappointment. So we want to make sure that you get in and take that. And as always, DCA, we are here to help and happy to answer any questions that you may have about anything DCA related. But again, just want to thank you for your commitment during these times. I know a lot of individuals are like, what's WebEx? And so how do I do this? And how do we get on board? And so I appreciate all of your flexibility as well during these times, just making sure that the functions and rule of the board continue during these times. And with that, I open up to any questions you may have.
Just one observation, if I may. Dr. Kirkmeyer, thank you very, very much for being here. And it is so true that we've had to develop strategies during the really unprecedented events, but we could not have gotten to where we are without your guidance and your leadership. So I thank you for that. My question is, with so much responsibility, nearly 40 bureaus and boards under your direction, is there anything that we can do to help create a more collegial environment to help you do what you do, so we can, engage in our collective work of protecting the interests of the people of the state that we serve?
Actually, I think there are definitely two things. One thing I mentioned a little bit, and that is trying to find additional board members. And not only for this board, but you all are the cream of the crop, right? You know people that would do a great job, maybe not only on BVMPT, but on other boards. And so really, if you know of anyone, please pass those names on to us, because we're always looking for individuals for boards, both public and licensees. So that's one area where I think we can work together to really fill those positions. The other place where I really think that we can work together is outreach. This has been something that continues to be raised as an issue because, and I saw this as, you may not know my history, but I was actually executive director for the medical board for a very long time and have worked within DCA, another board as well. You don't need to know about DCA until you need to know about DCA, right? We can go to health fairs, we can hand out flyers, we can go to county fairs, we can hand out flyers, but you don't need to know of DCA until you get, injured, until somebody, does something with your house inappropriately and, your house structure is not safe. That's when you need to know about DCA. So how do we reach individuals when they need to know about us? How do we get in their mind, oh, that's right, this happened to me. So that is one area where I think we can definitely work together. And then the other thing is just carrying out the role of your licensees, I think, is super important, and trying to get, we're trying to get our licensees to be like the same as what as California is, right? We're California for all. And so we want to make sure that our licensing pools look like California. And so that diversity is super important. So how do we get out to our underrepresented areas so these individuals can know that here's a licensing, here's a great thing we can do, so they can take the path to become licensed and be a LVN or be a Psych Tech or any other licensee. So we're really trying to reach those underrepresented areas to encourage them to become licensees of DCA. So those are three areas where I think we can partner together, because I think all of you probably have outreach opportunities within what you do, where we can get to groups of individuals to talk about DCA, and then also just encouraging you to carry that mantra like, hey, this is a great profession to enter into.
Wonderful. Thank you, Director.
Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.
I believe.
Yeah,
Are there other?
I would like to, Madam Chair, yes.
Hello, hi. I just want to just give a huge shout out to you and your team. Just amazing. I was appointed to the board back in October of 2020, and since then, the outreach, speaking of outreach, the professionalism, the willingness to talk through whatever we need to be able to function is huge, right? Because, I always say there's a difference between a leader and a boss. You seem to be leading your team and doing a wonderful job. I can't even name all of the staff who called me and talked to me about the work that we do, from Elaine to Carrie Holmes that you mentioned that left. I'm so happy that she was able to go and do what she wants to do. Vicky, the list goes on and on. Of your team. So I just wanted to say thank you, because if the staff, if we don't have great staff, we just won't have a great experience, if you will. So I wanted to say thank you.
Couldn't agree more. And we have incredible staff. The other thing is we have an open door policy. And the final thing, I'm going to steal my Chief Deputy Director's words. We don't want you to ever suffer in silence. If you have an issue, we do have that open door policy. So please contact us. Please work together with us. We're happy to help wherever we need to.
Madam Chair, if I may. Again, I wanted to echo the words of your leadership and the department. and the work that you're doing. But particularly on DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion, we've seen a state of emergency in many ways around this country, around this topic. And so I think it's imperative for there to be a tiger team, essentially, from all the different boards to work with you and your team on this. So I was just wondering if there was something of that sort that you're creating, and how we can play into that DEI strategy that you have.
Absolutely. So this work group that we've started, so we're kind of taking the lead of our agency, of Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. And as they kind of trickle down things that they're working on, we're going to be part of that. But we've also started our own DEI work group, and with Ms. Corcoran leading that. So she's going to be taking the lead. Right now we just have DCA staff, but we're going to be including executive officers. And I can see us potentially expanding out to board members as well to look at, what are the things, because it's not just, I talked a lot about licensees, because that's near and dear to my heart, is really bringing more licensees into the profession, but also within our staff. How do we, bring that into our staffing and into our employees as well, and just really building that succession planning. It's super important to us, and that's kind of where we're going. That's where we're starting with it, with this work group, and I think we're going to be building upon that, just continuing on and on. Yeah, definitely important to us. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's always an honor to be before all of you, and it's such a privilege to lead DCA. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to item 5, education reports, recommendations, and possible actions. Education Division report, Ms. Cordero.
Hello, good morning. Everyone, nice to see all of you again. So you have my Education Division report in front of you. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. You also have the list of the review and approval of executive officer program decisions for the period from January 11th, 2022 to March 22nd, 2022 for your review. So, any questions on the Education Division report?
I just want to confirm we still have 12 programs that completed the training and are online to start programs. Is that right?
9.
9. Okay.
9. Yeah, I wrote that report along. If it says 12, I'm sorry. I wrote it like
No,
months
that's what I'm
ago.
clarifying, because yesterday we talked about 9.
We talked about 9.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
9 proposed programs in the hopper.
Still good.
Still good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need a motion on that.
Oh. Can I have a motion and a second to approve and ratify? No, we don't want to ratify.
Executive officers.
Oh, the executive officers' program decisions for a period from January 11, 2022 to March 22, 2022, listed in the report dated May 20, 2022. Any discussion or questions? Seeing no discussion from the board, any public comment?
Madam Chair, this is not a motion coming out of committee, so there'll have to be a motion in a second.
Oh, we need a motion and a second.
That's
For
correct.
public comment and board comment.
Correct, thank you.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve and ratify the executive officer's review decisions and report of Board Nursing Education Consultant Program reports from January 11th, 2022 to March 22nd, 2022, as indicated in Agenda Item 5A1.
Thank you, Mr. Durkin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now, any discussion or questions from the board? Seeing none, it looks like we have a public comment. No public comment. Oh. So I will do a roll call and establish who is in favor, opposed, or abstains. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
I'm Carol Mountain, I say yes, so it is carried unanimously. We will move to item B, request to admit students.
We're on 5 to 8.
It's not. Okay, we will move to B1, Healthcare Career College Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Della Rosa is a nursing education consultant. Ms. Della Rosa, is there anything new or additional information to add to your report?
No, I do not have additional information.
Thank you so much. Can I have a motion to approve the report and adopt the recommendations and a second?
So moved.
I will second.
Thank you. Is there any comment from representatives of the program?
There is no representative from the program here.
Thank you. Any board discussion or questions? Seeing none, any public comment? All right. I will now do a roll call vote. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
Carol Mountain, I vote yes. That motion is carried unanimously. We will now move on to number 2, University of Antelope Valley Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Della Rosa, you got to stay in the same chair. Is the nursing education consultant. Ms. Della Rosa, is there anything new or additional information to your report?
No, no additional information.
Thank you so much. Can I have a motion to approve the report and adopt the recommendations and a second?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
John Deerkin will second.
Thank you. Is there any comment from representatives of the program?
There is no representative from the program present.
Thank you. Any board discussion or questions? Seeing no discussion, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll take a vote. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
I'm Carol Mountain. I vote yes. That motion is carried unanimously. We will move to number 3, Cypress College Psychiatric Technician. Dr. McLeod is the nursing education consultant. I'll wait for her to get to the table.
Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. McLeod, is there any new or additional information to your report?
There's no additional information to the report.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the report and adopt the recommendations and a second?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Abraham, I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any comment from representatives of the program?
He is not here this morning.
Thank you. Any board discussion or questions? Seeing no questions, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we will take a vote. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
I'm Carol Mountain. I also vote yes. This motion is carried unanimously. Okay. At this time, we will take a 5-minute recess. And please return at 9:45. All right, I believe we're ready to move forward. We're on C, reconsideration of provisional approval, request to admit, and curriculum revision. Number 1 is Gurnick Academy, San Mateo Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Silverman, is the nursing education consultant. Ms. Silverman, is there any new or additional information to add to your report?
No, there's not.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the report and adopt the recommendations and a second?
So move.
Thank you.
Dr. Brown, you have a representative here for the school.
Did we get a second? I didn't hear a second.
Abraham will second.
Thank you. Would the representative please come forward?
You all lonely up here with the entire room in the back?
Okay, my name is Larissa Revzina. Closer? Okay, my name is Larissa Revzina. I'm a director of Vocational Nursing School in Gurnik Academy of Medical Arts, San Mateo campus. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much. We went a long way, jumping through the hoops, you know, just like I did a lot of great job together. We're just like I think it's set up, and we really appreciate Faith. So thank you very, very much. Our representative, Jessica High, just right there.
Hello, nice to see you all. Jessica High from Dwayne Morris, representing Gurnik Academy. We appreciate Ms. Silverman's recommendation. Sure. Thank you very much. We appreciate Ms. Silverman's recommendation that the school is able to become fully approved and no longer on provisional. And we request that the board adopt that with one modification, which is the piece about ongoing admissions. Our thought here is that with the program being fully approved, we have proven that we meet the board's requirements and that there are sufficient resources available for the students who are enrolled and to be continuing. And so we'd like to request that with full approval, that we don't have to demonstrate ongoing application through the NEC to be able to enroll continuing students. I will also mention that the program has been in operation for about 17 years and has only ever once been on provisional, which was as a result of NCLEX pass rates, but we're obviously now proud to report that the pass rates are above the state minimum requirement. And in looking at the Practice Act, our thought is that if we are required as a fully approved program to submit for ongoing admissions, that that is a slight overreach, and we're requesting that we don't have to do that.
I'd like to speak to that. So normally when a program is removed from provisional approval, there is a period of grace in between. What happens is that they no longer have to come to the board to get approval for their classes, but they still are given oversight by the NEC, and then the NEC writes a report. It goes to the executive officers committee, just like you signed and ratified those reports at the beginning of this meeting. So too, when they request, they would submit documents. It's an intermediary phase so that the NEC can ensure that they're still continuing to go in the right direction. They have 2, 4, 6 quarters of good pass rates, and that is why I made my recommendation to have them come off. But I would like the opportunity to still watch them closely to make sure that that continues. And then at a later date, yes, I would recommend to go on to ongoing admissions.
Thank you. Is there any board discussion or board questions? All right, seeing none. Is there any public comment? Before we get off this topic, can we ask what would be the enrollment pattern that you would be following?
I'll let her speak to that, but I will just state that we're not asking for an increase in the number of students, nor increasing the frequency. It's specifically to keep with what we've been doing, just not having to submit to the NEC beforehand.
Yeah, we're just like not changing anything. No patterns, no increasing our students. We just like do not ask anything like this. Absolutely. So we're staying with the recommendations.
I believe their pattern of admissions before was requesting a class twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that information.
Yeah, twice a year.
25 students?
No, 30.
30.
So 30 students twice a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
can we go back?
Yes, you mean we can
just
go back.
wanted-
Just so I'm clear, are you saying that you, and I know you're not on trial here, I just wanted to get an understanding of what you're saying. So you complied with all of the NEC's recommendations
Absolutely.
so far, and in fact that you are now in a place where you've gone through that and we're good. You're good now. You can move forward.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is that you don't feel that you should have to have that piece of oversight because you've done all of that work to get here.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. I mean, our thought is that we know throughout the program, we've proven that we have the right resources available. And
Okay.
that's obviously demonstrated by her recommending that we come off of provisional. And we don't see an area within the regulations that specifically states that you have to submit to an NEC in order to have ongoing admissions for a fully approved program.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that I was clear in understanding what your reasoning is about not wanting to be an oversight over you. And I actually disagree with that. I think that just because we have corrected a behavior to get to a point where we can move, that then why not be monitored to see if you still deserve to have a program. And so that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
And let me just clarify that we absolutely respect what you all do here and the NEC's opinion, and it's not that we don't think that we shouldn't have any oversight. It's just that for this piece, for ongoing admissions, we don't see the part in the regulations that would require this.
The other thing is that right now, according to the executive officer decree that came down in COVID, all schools, even those with ongoing admissions, are submitting all documents every time they start a new class. So to grant a school ongoing admissions at this point is really a moot point because there is no school with no oversight by the NEC. All NECs are now having oversight over all programs with and without ongoing admissions.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Silverman. I was sitting here thinking, gee, I'm telling them every time I'm starting a class, so thank you. I have one last question. I just want to clarify that your clinical sites are strong and that you have
Very
enough
strong.
clinical sites
Very
for
strong.
your 30 students twice a year. That
Just
those are
totally, or everybody are placed during even COVID. We're just right there. Our student from Gwinnett Academy, specifically San Mateo, volunteering first in all the immunization clinics and all this kind of a thing. Very strong, and we do have clinical coordinator who just like outreach people who just like condense together everything. So just we work with Faye, like I said, making sure that we absolutely have the full support, clinical support for everything, and each single module. I mean, we submit to our NEC everything, including clinical sites, clinical faculty, and so on and so forth, just piece by piece, student by student.
And that's really what's generating our remarks here today, is because it's an overwhelming amount of work to submit what has been submitted previously. And so we know that there are strains on NECs, and there's also strains within the school. Time is better spent making sure that the students are well supported. And so because we don't see a piece where it would make sense for us to have to do this. In addition, it's just a lot of time that could be better spent in other areas supporting the program.
Well, right now, clinical sites across the state of California are at a premium. And so myself, I'm also a director. I also do this work. I think that the submission of clinical sites, making sure that each program reports to their NEC that they have the appropriate clinical sites to support their program, at this point right now, it isn't really above and beyond, and it really is something that we should be able to do. I would be more than happy to share the form I use when I submit to my own NEC with you, so that you can see that I quickly just fill in
I know the
where I
forms.
am. So no, it's my own form that I just am able to quickly fill in my numbers of students coming in and where they'll be attending clinicals, because I think that we'll be doing this for a while, because clinical sites are premium, and it's going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. So, and I know that even in the San Mateo area, sometimes it's tough to get, especially like OB and peds. It can be very hard to get places for LVN students, especially to be able to get that very much needed hands-on time that moves theory into practice.
Understandable, definitely with the clinical piece, but this is more faculty, right? What are all the pieces of the forms that you're submitting?
I mean,
It's more than just the clinical aspect.
yeah, but yeah, we understand. Yeah.
Okay.
The motion.
Back to the motion, yes? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any more board discussion? Any public comment? Can we move to the vote?
Yes.
Okay, so we will move to the vote. Ms. Brown?
Please restate the motion.
Reconsideration of provisional approval, request to admit and curriculum revision as stated in the report by Ms. Silverman.
The motion was actually to accept the report.
Yes.
And adopt the
Approve and
recommendations.
adopt the recommendations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Second the motion.
No, we're voting.
Oh, already? Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks? Yes. I'm Carol Mellon, I say yes. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Seriously, thank you very much.
We will move on to Curran College Vocational Nursing Program. Ms. Gomez is the nursing education consultant. We'll give her a minute to get up here and get organized.
Madam Chair, the record should reflect that Christy Shields, Regulatory Counsel, has joined us.
Thank you so much. Ms. Gomez, is there anything new or additional information to report? And Mr. Swenson, is this where we mention the packet or?
Just first.
So for the record, I'd like to say that the board did receive a packet of information from Curran and its counsel. It was received this morning and distributed to the board members present on the dais. It can be made part of the record in this matter.
I did have something that I did want to say, and that is that there is a typo on my report on page 5 where I have written 8 consecutive quarters. It should be 7, and it does say 7 several other places in the report. So that was just a typo there.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez.
Just to follow up, does that change the conclusions made in your report?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to approve the report and adopt the recommendations and a second?
I will so move.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. I do believe there is a representative from the program.
Yes, my name is Jeff Kravitz. I'm an attorney. I have been retained by Coram College to represent them here at this hearing. Dr. Wayne Williams, the president of the college, is here, and he'll also be speaking on the issues. And 3 students from the program are in attendance and would be giving comments during the public comment section. May I begin?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I'll note in the documentation that I brought here today, I had a chart. It was pointed out to me by Mr. Swenson that the chart may have personal information in it. So upon his advice, I took that chart out because it had the names of the students. However, the statistics are correct and can, of course, be verified by the statistical analysis of the board itself. Before I begin, I'd like to point out that there's a certain bit of, kismet here, as this hearing began with a very impassioned discussion of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how does one meet that? Well, as I point out in my documentation here, and is known to people and will be obvious to all, Curram College works with a population primarily of immigrant students, many of whom don't speak English as a first language. If one is serious about reaching the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you'd have to understand that that population may have difficulty passing the test on the first time. Now, the regulations that exist in the rules, as I point out and so forth, they do not require that this board only consider first-time passers. That doesn't exist. 25 CCR 2530 sets first-time passers as a benchmark, but it doesn't say that's what the board should consider. We have crunched the numbers for the past 3 years, and we've come to the determination, and I believe that this will be verified by your own work, that 81% of the students from Curram College who've taken the test have passed and gone on, some to be LVNs, and many to do bridge programs and become RNs over the course of the past 3 years. Now, the test structure allows a person to take the test and then retake the test 45 days later. It just doesn't seem rational to say that we throw out the people who pass the test later because of the fact that they didn't pass it earlier, and therefore get rid of this college, which has produced these nurses who are out in the field practicing at a time when there is, everybody says, a shortage of nurses who need to do this vital work. So I believe that we should consider the overall passing rate, including the second-time takers. Now, particularly here, less than a year has passed since the new curriculum that this board adopted has been used by Curram College. And the first class to pass it, all of them have not even taken the test, let alone taken the test a second time. Some of them might take a test a second time as soon as this month. We don't know. So we have six students who've never taken the test from the current class. Generally speaking, even the CCR statute I noted talked about a 2-year period of time to review a curriculum and so forth. So that should be understood. More data should be analyzed before reaching the conclusion that this school is not reaching its ultimate purpose, which is to produce qualified students. And if people seriously believe that the goal is to produce qualified students that meet the goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one should consider that also. Because we're not saying change the test. They're taking the same test. Some of them are just taking it twice. What's wrong with that? I mean, is there something wrong with it? Is there a reason? Then don't give it twice. If the rule is that we don't consider people who've taken the test twice or as qualified to be nurses, don't give it twice.
Except that we know that a second-time test taker has a 50% less chance of passing that test. Each time you take that test, there's statistical evidence that shows that your chance of passing that test goes down, down, down. And that's why we look at first-time test takers. That's why we prepare our students so that they are qualified the first time out the gate to take that test. So I appreciate your point about students that are not English as a first language, but that kind of falls on the school. So let's put it in perspective.
I don't see how it falls on the school. My point, you're stating that there's a statistic that shows that second-time test takers generally fail, and we're claiming let's review the actual statistics of the school. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to have an actual statistical analysis, not a theoretical statistical analysis. Students who take the test the second time are qualified as nurses. No one ever asks them. It's over. You take the test, you become a nurse. the issue's over. So the question is, does the school produce qualified nurses? And the answer to the question is yes, they do. 80% of the students who've taken the test in the past 3 years, the reality is that they have passed the test. That is the actual fact. We have a standard, but if we are to take seriously goals of reaching this diversity, equity, and inclusion, one has to rethink the qualifications and the standards that we use. Otherwise, you will never reach that goal. So that's the issue. Now, that is, and also on this point.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you for asking and answering your own questions. I mean, we're not even, you're telling us what we should be thinking and feeling and how you believe the board would act. However, if your argument is that ESL students deserve a second chance, I mean, I have compassion for people that struggle with English as being their second language and education, right? But if you're going to argue for them, then are you then going to argue for somebody that's dyslexic or have learning disabilities or have limited resources to learn and struggle with test taking? I mean, I don't know if your argument should be, oh, this is an ESL issue. Well, I think, and I agree with the chair, Madam Chair, that this is a school issue. You need to figure out how best to present the information to where someone can pass. And for you to say that you don't believe somebody should have to take the test twice, I don't understand that reasoning, sir. And I think, are you an attorney?
I absolutely am.
Okay. So you can finish your thoughts, okay? But you don't get to ask and answer the questions to the board.
Okay. Well.
Okay. Thank you.
What I'm doing is presenting argument.
Okay.
But my point, and I understand your point very well, is that if we're going to review the qualifications and the ability of the school, we should not only look at the ability of first-time test takers, because the rules allow people to take the test more than once. So if you look at the totality of it, you look at what the result is, and then you use that through a prism of what are the goals that the board is trying to achieve. If one of those goals is the goal of increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so forth, then you would look and say, hey, this school seems to do that because it creates this pool of students who have passed. Now, I would also ask in this, because there actually are 3 separate issues, although one, it's sort of a moot point. If you revoke the license of the school, obviously then they don't get to admit another class. However, the board could separate these issues on the issue of whether they should be allowed to admit a new class or revoke the license. They could allow the provisional approval to continue without at this time approving for a new class. So that option appears to me to exist in the way the items are separated as 3 separate items, and I think they should be viewed in that way and determined in that way so that we get a complete determination of the issues.
We have several questions from the board members.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So Jessica, I have a question for you. Is the issue of the test scores the basis for any of your recommendations in your report?
It is a very small part of it. Like it says, they do not have the pass rates, but attendance, evaluation of the students, these are also very important information. I was going over a form that he gave me while I was there, and it very clearly spells out every hour that the student spent in the program, and he told me that he cannot be able to correlate his makeup because he doesn't know, he wasn't able to know exactly what they taught. But on this absentee form that he gave me, every hour was identified on here. And when I went over it last Sunday, the one glaring thing that I saw was that pediatrics was not on here, other than just in clinical.
Thank you.
I have a few questions for Dr. Williams, but I wanted to ask you a question.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I have a couple of questions for Dr. Williams, but I wanted to ask you a question also as you bring up taking the test twice and why shouldn't someone take the test twice. And I want to ask it as a thought question, not a question to answer, all right? Rhetorical, kind of like what you've been doing. And that is, would you like your nurse to have 2 chances to get your medication correct?
What's 7? Well, the rule of this board is that a person who takes the test twice is eligible to be a nurse. If you're going to go around and taint their records, you can do it, but I'm not going to.
That's correct, but we want to educate first-time test takers to be successful, sir. And that's a part of nursing education for as long as I've been in nursing education, which is quite a few years. I'd like to ask Mr. Williams a couple questions, if it's all right.
First of all,
Dr. Williams.
Yeah, Ms. Gomez referred to me as he. I have a name. My name is Dr. Williams for her. Dr. Mountain, you and I both know that the board allows people to write that exam 7 times. Not 1, not 2. So where does the board come into if you have responsibilities, you say, to the public, and you're saying that the nurse who writes the exam the 2nd time has a less chance of getting the medication right?
Well, I didn't say that.
Well, you said there was sort of a possibility there that was said. What about the nurse who writes the exam 7 times? Do you want that nurse taking care of you?
Statistically, I'd like to see how many people pass. I know a few people that have passed after taking it 5 times, but it's a pretty small statistical.
I really don't want to argue. That's not
not
my purpose. That doesn't get us anywhere.
I have a couple of quick questions for you.
Go ahead.
One is on page 8. I noticed that according to the program director, the theory makeup time was used for the students to study what they feel academically weak in, not to make up missed theory objectives. So my question for you, sir, is we both understand remediation, and that when students are struggling or having problems or making up time, we know that a identified remediation plan needs to be developed related to student learning outcomes. And I'm asking, how are you able to determine remediation success if there is no written remediation plan focused on those student learning outcomes?
Okay, one of the issues that I identified when the NEC came out type thing, there is a policy, there's documentation in the classroom for the instructors to fill in. Unfortunately, they didn't do it on a consistent basis. And technically, if I'm teaching the class, I know when the student left. I should be able to fill in the form and say, hey, look, they left 15 minutes into the program. I happen to be doing this particular part of theory in cardiovascular. That did not happen. They did not do it. So I say that when I look at it, I take blame for that. I take responsibility for that I was not able to say, this is exactly what it is that you missed. So in the makeup time in between the terms, I offer the opportunity to every student to come. Now, there were a group of students who had to make up specific time. They had either 25, whether 0.15 hours, whether it was 5 hours, 10 hours, what have you. But I didn't say, the rest of you don't come. I said, we're offering skills lab, we're doing skills and what have you. If you want to hone up on your skills, come. Yet in the report, I get singled out because I had 16 people who showed up for a skills lab and only 3 or 4 of them had time to make up.
And how have you documented your remediation so that you are able to follow that?
As I said, I did not have specific times as to what they did, but what we did have is we had reviews in all of the medical surgical content again. We offered all of the skills. We set up the skills lab in different skills. Students came and they practiced, and we supervised. And that was the other thing that was said too. Our sheet only has place for 1 instructor to sign in. That doesn't mean that we only have 1 instructor in there. The lead instructor signs in. So I pulled the time cards. I didn't do it. The instructor who looked at it said I was there. I was signing people off. She pulled the time cards to show that the 2 of them were working. There were no other classes taking place in the college that day. Both of them were in there.
I appreciate that, but part of remediation is evaluation. I know you already know that, but we need documentation. So I have another question related to the same thing. I also noticed that there was a student who missed 71 hours of theory, which is a significant miss.
It is.
And my question is, if you have a student who's missed 71 hours of theory, how can that student go to clinical? Because we know that clinical is taking everything you learn in theory and applying it. So if you're missing a large chunk of your theory, how are you able to function in a safely, which is safety is the issue, in the clinical environment? I would have had a really hard time sending that student to clinical.
Okay.
So that's something that gives me great concern.
Well,
and my last thing related to the same thing is it also said in the report that you have 16 students at each clinical site.
that is not true.
No, I didn't say no.
That is not true.
No,
Okay.
I didn't say that.
So you are still holding at the 15 line.
No.
No. Oh, how many students do you have in
We
clinical?
have 2 instructors. We have 7 in one group. We have 8 in the other.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. That makes me feel a lot better. Thank you.
I mean, you have an instructor at your college that could verify that. He was one of my instructors at the time, and he only had 8 students at the most.
We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Currum.
I hope not.
And can you just tell me really quick where your students are going to clinical?
Our students are. Do you want the names of places? Because I can get. Okay.
You know, just a general idea, like they're spending time in the long-term care. They're spending time
in long-term care in nursing. Most of the larger facilities here in town, the larger facilities, the people with more acute care, higher acuity than a lot of others. Our pediatrics and our OB are done in doctor's offices.
Nice.
Okay. They were done in. Ms. Gomez can probably remember that we had them only go in the doctor's office a number of years ago just for pediatrics, and we went back and we renegotiated the contract so that we could do it, Peds and OB, but it's 2 separate
Nice.
times. Okay, so we do have that.
And you're not having any trouble getting. Clinical is such a big issue.
We never had any
across the
trouble
state of
all through
California.
COVID. We never had any trouble, and we even have facilities that. Had received waivers from CDPH to allow students to come in type thing. So we never close. We continue through the whole the COVID. The student was 71 hours. This is a student who had COVID twice, and we tried to accommodate her as much as we possibly could type thing. And I agree with you. Theory drives practice, and if you don't have a good solid theoretical background, it's you have students come all the time and say, well, I can't pass the theory, but I'm great in clinical. No, you're not.
Correct.
Because theory drives practice.
Absolutely.
So in her case, I mean, she needed quite a bit of nurturing, follow-up. The instructors were very well aware where we were, but, it is what it is on that.
I appreciate your clarifications.
It is what it is.
Are there other questions from the board? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would like to make one other comment. It was brought out about the population of the students that attend the school, and that they are all English as second language, and that they have difficulty, and that they are from very specific descendants, and that they travel from Yuba. Yuba has a college of vocational nurses up there. It is called Tri-County ROP. At this school, they are seeing the very same students with an 80% pass rate. Additionally, they have Sutter One Stop right in the same parking lot as them. And they offer English as a second language. They offer the students the ability who are having a hard time with the English language to be able to understand what they're learning and to be able to understand English as a second language. This is an opportunity that they're given. I am concerned that if a school is having just students who are English as second language and having this kind of difficulty that they do not have some kind of a program to offer these students because they are consciously admitting these students into their program.
Just one clarifying question, if I may, Madam Chair, of Ms. Gomez. You heard the statements and testimony made by the school representative, Dr. Williams, and counsel, which was in the nature of argument. Some of the information may have been slightly new, correction offered for the purpose of clarification. Does any of that information change the recommendations that you made in the report regarding this school?
No, it does not. I'm concerned. Number one, like I brought out, I cannot find pediatrics that was taught to this group of students. He's got a very detailed, hour by hour, what was taught. I do not see that pediatrics was taught. Sick child is a required course in the program, and sick child clinicals is a required course in the program. And so where he is detailed hour by hour what was taught, it's concerning to me that somehow it didn't make it on his attendance.
Can I respond to that?
Thank you.
You know, Ms. Gomez, it's really interesting that you come up with all this stuff after the fact. You know, you faulted me because I send you a corrected statement of the hours. You faulted me for that. You send me an email accusing me of misrepresentation. You know, and when we went back, I said to you, we are going to do a total audit of the hours. We need to know exactly where we stand. To me, it's like going to the bank and getting a loan. They find out later that they owe you some money, but you won't accept the report. You know, you wouldn't accept the report. When you're going over that again on Sunday night, as you said you did, you notice pediatrics. You didn't shoot me an email and say, hey, you know, I'm going through this here, but there's no pediatrics. Where is the pediatrics? But then if we would have sent it to you, you probably would have accused me of misrepresentation. I can't win. I can't win, and it's not about a win thing, it's about looking at the documentation that was submitted. It's the same thing about the two instructors. It didn't even come up in the initial report. It seemed like it was an aha, some other issue here, but it could have showed you that there were two instructors in the lab. That's just my point. It's just that, you know, you're telling me that I didn't do it when I know we did. But yet you're looking at a report. If I were looking at a report and I saw something, my question would be, where is it? Let me reach out to that person and say, why is this not right? Where's the pediatrics here?
Madam Chair,
Madam
Chair, if I could speak to the motion, please. There is, of course, a motion and a second on the floor. And I believe Council Kravitz had mentioned that, you know, that motion does encompass several points. It is entirely appropriate to ask the makers of the motion and the second if they want to amend that motion at any time to as council had suggested, to perhaps separate the question and take action on one part and possibly defer others to a future meeting.
Madam Chair, I have a question for Dr. Wang.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Wang, so at any point did you attempt to get the information for the pediatric hours over to
I didn't know that she was missing them. I really didn't. And then after, you know, I got a couple emails from Ms. Gomez that basically said, in essence, things are over. You know,
well, no, my question was very specific. So you never, you didn't know about it, is what you're saying?
No, I'm just finding out about it now.
Okay.
That she doesn't have the hours of pediatrics.
Okay, thank you kindly.
I'd like to take this opportunity, unless there's other questions, to know, is it customary that you would repeatedly tell somebody what's missing in a documentation that they should have or should know to submit
for the information you're requesting, is that something that you would, I understand like common courtesy, doctor, right? I get that, and I have all utmost respect for people, for doctors, for everybody, okay? I'm just saying that when we know that certain things should exist in your documentation, and we know that if we receive things and it's not there, then it doesn't exist. We know that documentation matters, especially within the work that the healthcare profession does, in everything we do. You pay a bill, you can't prove that you paid it. You got to have proof of it, right? So you didn't send it to her, and I hear respectfully that you are basically blaming for not for her not telling you you didn't do your job, right? The accountability to me, respectfully, is for everybody. And just say this time she didn't reach out and say, hey, doctor, I don't see the pediatric in the file. You can't fault her for that when we, who sends it, should have all those things together. It's an accountability that we must take individually, is what I'm saying. Right? Okay.
I agree. And as I say, I'm just hearing now that the pediatric wasn't in the report. So it's not like I intentionally didn't include it. Okay. I didn't realize it wasn't in there.
Sir, do you, when you send things, do you go back and look at what you sent? And this is just a general, because I do, and I'm not expecting people to do that. But when you send things, do you look at what you send? Especially something of this importance, this magnitude. I cannot accept that we are blaming other people for that. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, may I speak again? Ms. Gomez, did you ever reach out to let him know that you were missing this part of the report?
I did not, and the reason was he had received counsel, and I was informed not to reach out to him because he had gotten a lawyer. I'm sorry, Dr. Williams had gotten a lawyer.
Okay, thank you.
If I may speak to this issue, Madam Chair, the issue of the missing pediatric hours could be considered a factor in aggravation, but it's not one of the violations set forth in the report and recommendations.
It was not. It's just something that was identified after.
So the board can consider it as a factor in aggravation, but it cannot consider it as a violation because it's not in the recommendation.
Exactly.
It has been brought to our attention too. Thank you very much for this packet of information that you gave us. There's no way that the board could go through this on our 5-minute break. Myself, for sure, I need time to read this. So it has been suggested by council that we change the motion. Is that correct wording? Change the motion, and that we will, the motion will be amended.
At its pleasure, the board could, or the makers of the motion could amend it to address the request for starting a class, and then it could either consider the other recommendations separately, or could table it and defer it to a future board meeting.
Mr. Swenson, please clarify this. We need someone to make a motion, an amended motion, correct?
The maker of the motion should amend his or her motion.
Okay.
That's correct. The motion can be withdrawn, or the maker of the motion and the second may agree to amend the motion.
Who made the original motion is the question. I think John did. I believe you did, Mr.
I would withdraw the motion.
And then you would ask for a substitute motion.
Could we have
Do we have
a new motion?
I'm sorry, would we need concurrence by the second council?
That's correct.
Who seconded?
I agree to withdraw the original motion.
Thank you. Do we have a new motion at this time?
I would move to deny admittance to Curran College, a full-time class of 20 students to commence on May 31st, 2022, with a graduation date of March 14th, 2023, as indicated in the NEC's report.
I second the motion.
Thank you.
Council, discussion on the motion. We now have discussion on the motion.
Discussion on the new motion and opportunity for public comment.
Thank you so much. Is there board discussion or questions on the new motion? Okay, seeing no discussion, is there public comment?
May I ask a point of order? Would it be appropriate for the students to speak? I mean, basically, they're here to speak really on the second issue of the. They're here now, so would it make sense for them to speak now, or should they? Is there going to be I don't know what the procedure is going to be. Is there going to be a second motion on the issue of the continued on the revocation question? That's what I don't know. Is there going to be one? Oh, okay. All right. It's better if they speak then. Well, they're here now, so yes. That's okay. I'm sure people can figure it out, yes? Go ahead.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, good morning, everyone. I really respect everyone for their decisions and whatever points you have pointed out. My name is Ramandeep Kaur, and I'm one of the former students from Curran College of Nursing from VN 21. Before me, I would like to get one more name in here. That's Lovepreet Singh from VN 19. He's my husband. He's also a graduate from Curran College of Nursing. He did his LVN in Curran College. I know the fact was taken out for the first time passers or the second time, right? He did his LVN. He didn't pass the first time. He took a second chance. 45 days later, he passed it with a great success. His computer shut down at 85, you know, the magical numbers. And then after that, now we both are RNs. We both did our RNs from Carrington College in Boise, and fortunately he's a BSN right now. And I think after his second attempt too, he did great in his career. I think it's not the end of the world if he didn't pass it for the first time. He was like, when he came on, he was like, Roman, I think I failed because I got nervous on the first question. It's not like he was not taught in the school. It was not that he didn't study, but it was kind of like his mentality that he got nervous and he was then not able to answer the other questions. I did my LVN in the same school. I came in US in 2019. 2 months later, I joined Curran in June 2019, and I think it was a great opportunity. As he got up the issue that yes, English was my second language. I knew Hindi and Punjabi, but it was really hard for me to go communicate in English. I didn't understand in the first time that what my teachers were saying to me, but I think they helped me a lot to get over that. The two instructors, Mr. Vertido and Santos, they helped us. They knew that English was their second language and they didn't post it on us no, you should know that. No, they agree that we don't know everything in here. So they helped us a lot, and then I did my LVN. I passed it, fortunately, the first time. I'm an RN right now. We both work in Right Out Hospital in Marysville. And I think even if he passed the second time, it was a great opportunity for him. His work didn't end, and he had a lot more opportunities again and again. He's going for his MSN now. Hopefully he is going to start his NP after that. And I think it's second time nurses should be given a chance and should not be considered a failure, because the real world, what I have learned in 6 months working in a hospital, the real world and the school world is really, really different. I go to a hospital and I was like, no, they taught us that in school in a different way, and they were like, no, it's a different world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jannat Preet. I just graduated from Curran College and began 24 with the new curriculum. I finished my classes in January. I took my test in April, and I am currently working at the same clinical facility where we work for clinicals with 4 other students that have graduated with me in the previous class. Given the questions that you guys had for Dr. Williams, I personally do believe a couple of things that you said with the Asian community that attended the school. I personally did commute from Yuba. It was a long drive. And Ms. Gomez, you mentioned about the colleges in Yuba. I've been waiting to get into the RN program at Yuba College and other places, but it gets harder every time. Me and my friends, after a couple of years of waiting, we decided that we wanted to go privately, and QM College came as a first name because a lot of my friends' siblings have gone there, my cousins have gone there, and we all had success. I personally also did come from India in 2015. I didn't have that much of an issue for English to be creating a lot of problems with me, but I do believe that given the dynamic of our class, we had a lot of students who weren't as fluent in English, but that did not change the meaning of that, them not understanding anything. Mr. Vatito, Ms. Santos, and Dr. Williams personally did encourage us a lot. With the makeup hours that we were talking about, they told us to bring up any of the topics regardless of that being taught or not taught. We also had a lot of opportunity discussing things with VN19, VN23, and I do believe that even though there's a reason to understand that there is a difference between first time and second time test takers, a lot of things depend on the person as well. Personally, I was very, very nervous. I couldn't sleep for like 2 days. Even after the results came out, I wasn't able to sleep. I lost plenty of weight. This is like shrunk me, but and it does take a toll. Yes, and then while giving the test, I had a lot of thoughts that did I answer this question correctly? And I feel like even though I understand that the school has a responsibility to make us understand that this is the type of questions you're going to face, this is what you're going to have to do, it still comes down to the same kind of thinking that I have to do something for it as well. Dr. Williams has been very, very accommodating. We had a lot of issues with one of our instructors, Mr. Vatito, because given that you said that the hours we missed, he did take off hours just because we were loud at breaks or we would come back a minute late or something like that, but that didn't mean that we were in class. Everybody was in class. The missing hours were just him cutting hours from the total timing, and we also did make up those hours at the end of our terms as well. Given how Mr. Vatito and Mrs. Santos had taught us, we were probably named the best classes at clinicals as well, and that is one of the reasons that we got hired after graduating from the school and passing the test. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Blessing Okocha. I'm from Nigeria, Africa. I'm not Indian. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So I have families that are going to Korean College before me, not close. And when I came, they recommended nursing. I have a BSc from my country. But coming here, I felt like, oh, you need to try something different. Nursing was entirely new to me. So I did not have any science background or anything. So going to Korean College felt like, can I do it? Can I not do it? The facilitators were great. Personally, I would say I learned a lot from them. I wrote my exam. So I finished class, my last exam, January 31st. I took my board exam in March. And I passed on 75 questions. So for me, it's a school I would recommend to anybody. And when he talked about, oh, they're going to shut down the school or the school was on probation, I'm like, I already told people about the school. They are great. They listen to you and they understand you. I personally have a friend that failed his exam in April. He took his NCLEX in April and he failed. We studied together. The school taught us the same thing. We studied together. I met him every day, Mondays to Friday, because I had to work the night shift. I met him and we studied the same thing, but he failed his test. And when I asked him, I would not say because the school did not teach us well. I won't say because he didn't study well. Like someone said, he probably was nervous. He probably, I don't know, he was thinking a lot into the questions, but did Korean College teach us well? I personally would say yes. They gave me the best experience. For any question I had, for any challenge I had, I could easily ask Ms. Santos. So I told Ms. Santos my experience. Every time I saw a test or I saw a question on the NCLEX, all I did was, what did Ms. Santos tell me to do? During my clinical times, I see a question, I'm like, how did Ms. Santos tell me to do this? There's some questions that talked about procedures. I'm like, what is the first thing Ms. Santos will tell me to do? I would always remember. I wasn't trying to I was trying to understand the question, but I was trying to relate it with what I was taught, and it helped me personally. So when I got to the 75 questions and it stopped, I'm like, I knew I passed because I knew I did everything the school taught me. So when my result came out and I saw it, I sent a message immediately. This is what I was taught. So did the school teach me well? Yes. My friend didn't pass. Doesn't mean he didn't study well? No. Doesn't mean Quran College did not teach him well? No. He was taught well. He probably was nervous. He probably, I don't know what happened, but that was it. I heard you talk about nursing pediatric. Ms. Santos personally taught us pediatric in, that was our fourth term, yeah. She personally taught us pediatric, and we went for clinicals for it. So my experience in Quran was excellent, and yeah.
Other public comment to that motion?
Madam Chair, I would like to ask for a caucus on this.
Under the Bagley-Kenopa Meeting Act, all the boards of business must be conducted in public.
I do have a clarifying question of Ms. Gomez, the NEC, if I may. You heard the statements during the public comment period, very articulate statements by the former students. Does that change any of the recommendations you provided in your report?
No, it doesn't. I do not know a single student who has gone in to take the NCLEX that was not nervous. Every single student does that. And another thing that's very important to understand is it's not just the BBMPT that looks at the first-time test takers. It's NCLEX itself. And the only report that they send nationwide is first-time testers.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Gomez. That's very important.
Thank you.
So, are we ready to take a vote on the motion? Mr. Swenson, would you please restate the motion?
The motion is to accept the NEC report and recommendation as it relates to denial of the request for a new class.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks? Yes. I also vote yes on Carol Mountain. The motion carries by a vote of 7. It is unanimous. Mr. Swenson, we need another motion, is that correct?
At this time, the board has two options. It could take up the other recommendations either together or separately, or it could vote to defer those issues to a later board meeting at its pleasure.
Do we have a motion?
I would move to revoke the provisional approval of Curran College Vocational Nursing Program effective immediately, and to remove the program from the board's list of approved vocational nursing schools effective May 20th, 2022.
Second. Is there any comment? Do we go to board discussion now? Or? Board discussion first. Is there any board discussion about this? Is there any public comment related to this topic? Seeing none, I will take a vote. Ms. Brown?
Abstain.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks? Yes. My name is Carol Mountain. I also vote yes. The motion is carried with 6 votes of yes and 1 abstain. We will now move to item 6, Executive Officer's Report. Ms. Yamaguchi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the board members have my report in print. There haven't really been any major changes since then, but I would be happy to take any questions or ask for any other comments or suggestions. No.
So we can move on. We're going to have a slight change in our item listings, and at this time we will do item 9, Legislative and Regulations Report, Recommendations and Possible Actions. Ms. Carpenter, Chairperson. Ms. Lewis, Board Member.
Yes, Alita Carpenter, Chair of the Legislation and Regulations Committee. We had a meeting on March 23rd. It was the first meeting of the newly constituted committee comprised of myself and Board Member Luce. We discussed and received updates on several key topics, including the strategic plan. Ms. Yamaguchi presented an overview, and we discussed options for moving forward, including an increased presence at the state capitol and creation of a calendar similar to our rulemaking calendar. This would detail concepts for potential legislation. It would allow our staff to be better prepared for future legislative sessions. We discussed current legislation. Ms. Yamaguchi updated us on AB 1733, which we talked about yesterday, and it's mentioned earlier today, deals with the ability to hold virtual meetings while conforming to Bagley-Keene requirements. Also AB 1662, which addresses pre-licensure determinations. We discussed these bills at our April 7th full board meeting. The rulemaking update, Ms. Perez updated us on each item on the rulemaking calendar. Mr. Swenson advised us that as a public document, this calendar will enable the public to understand what we're working on, and when approved, it will be posted on the BVNPT website. That completes the Reg Committee report. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Ms. Yamaguchi, are you going to speak on bill tracking?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we've pulled together, put 2 bills on the board's agenda for discussion and possible action. The first bill is Senate Bill 994 by Senator Bill Jones on behalf of the Naturopathic Doctors Association. This is an interesting bill, and on the first read it seems very, very simple. Essentially, it would authorize licensed vocational nurses to work under the direction of naturopathic doctors. We've been discussing this concept with the naturopaths for a number of years, and as I said, on the first read, it seems like a very simple and clear thing. And on the plus side of that, it offers another avenue for employment and another potential avenue for clinical opportunities for LVN students. But as we continue to discuss this, a number of we won't quite call them real big concerns, but more logistical questions that we feel would be important to address, to work with the sponsors and the author's office. Most principally, when I asked counsel, is that going to be as simple as just going through our regs and adding naturopathic doctors under every section that authorizes the direction of an LVN? I was told fairly clearly that it would probably require a much more intensive review of a number of things, and the NECs have also advised me that because the fields that naturopaths do in their practice is somewhat different and new, and forgive me for using the buzzword holistic, the NECs were concerned a bit about one, the existing curriculum, and two, the fact that in this practice, one, the NCLEX itself does not incorporate naturopathy as a topic and does not recognize this as a clinical topic, and neither do most RN schools. So, in a sense, it creates a little bit of a hiccup, if you will, for LVNs and LVN students if they did choose to engage this way, but it wouldn't be for, as I said, something that would be on the NCLEX. It wouldn't be something that the RN schools that they would possibly be applying to later would recognize as a criteria. So there's a number of things, and I think mostly my concern would be just actually just launching this as a whole right away. Not to put too fine a point on it again, but as we've seen, I think the board is intimately aware for the past couple of months that regulatory action takes some time. Developing those rulemaking packages is going to take some time, and we have a big agenda for rulemaking for the next couple of years. I had a really good conversation with the executive officer of the Naturopathic Doctors Committee, and because she's actually the head of a staff of 3, said, yeah, writing regs myself wasn't going to be my first choice for next year either. But I think it's fair to say that this is not a proposal that is a bad thing for our licensees and for our board. It's just that I don't know that the bill as written is ready to move forward in a really positive way. I think our recommendation, staff's recommendation, would be to ask the author and sponsor to either table this or perhaps to amend it to change it to a study bill, for example, or possibly even because I think naturopaths' practices are concentrated in Los Angeles County and possibly up in the North Bay Area. Would they be interested in possibly engaging in a pilot program to see how that would work and the short term and the long term? So I think what I would ask the board to do, to consider today, would be to authorize staff to speak with the sponsors in the author's office to see about tabling it, delaying implementation, looking into a study, because the one thing, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is the naturopaths have told me that other states do have this arrangement and to great effect. They weren't really able to tell me what states, and they also weren't able to really tell me, because as we've discussed before, the differences in scope for LVNs varies from place to place to place. So we do not have that kind of deep analysis of an LVN in this state that is engaging in this kind of practice. Is that comparable in the training and in the practice of our LVNs? And the other last thing is, I wonder about not including psychiatric technicians. And just because we've seen over the past several years that there is a growing need and a growing call for highly trained mental health professionals. And I know that on a side note, myself and the AEO have met with folks in workforce development, and we've talked quite a bit about the governor's initiative to improve and expand mental health public services, and to which we've always said you should be looking at the psych techs as an avenue for providing this care. So in as much as naturopathy kind of, as I said, uses that more holistic, whole patient approach, it does seem that to not specifically include the psychiatric technicians is also a mistake. And that would be another thing that we would suggest that we include in contacting the author and sponsors. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. That was really well said.
Council would like to be recognized.
Go ahead.
Just from a regulatory perspective, currently the way the bill's written, there's just not a lot of there.
Right.
And you have to remember that a supervisor and a supervisee have to have the same scope, because you can't supervise somebody who has a different scope than you do, because you have to exercise management and control over that supervisee. So in order to write regulations that would map that out, our relationship, we have to know how that would work in the statute, and there's nothing in here right now. So my concern from a regulatory perspective is I don't know how we would do regulations if there isn't more worked out in the legislation. So it would be very difficult for you to implement anything like this at all, from my perspective.
Is it possible that this was just introduced as a spot bill to begin?
I hope so, because this is not doable the way it's currently written, in my opinion.
It was not.
I don't know how you do it. It just hasn't been thought through. And I think your ideas for a pilot program, or you'd map out that relationship, because again, the supervisor and the supervisee have to have the same scope. Right. And MDs have much narrower scopes, from what I understand, in our state. Yeah. So, in any event, I just want to bring that up, because I don't see how I can write regulations for you the way that it's currently written. It'd just be impossible.
And having just gone through a very vague...
Yeah, no, it was terribly painful. So.
Now, Councilor Shield raises a really, really good point, and that is the fact that this bill is so very vague, and asking for some kind of intermediary phase between actually accepting that. And I think also that comment about scope and variance, that was the huge concern of the Medical Board of California and the Medical Association, because they added the amendment to the bill that specified that a naturopathic doctor can't direct an LVN to do anything that naturopathic doctor is not valid license to do. So it is an interesting thing, and like I said, the concept itself is a good one. It's just that the bill as written creates a good amount of concern. So as I said, I would ask the board to authorize us to do some advocacy and interaction with the author and sponsors.
Thank you for all those comments. Very, very helpful. Can I have a motion at this time and a second to approve the staff recommendation to take a neutral position on SB 994 and share concerns with the author and sponsor?
I would so move, Madam Chair, and then further direct staff to review, analyze, and possibly make recommendations regarding this bill.
Can do.
Alita Carpenter, and second that motion. Thank you so much. Any board discussion or questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment?
Madam Chair, since the scope of practice for vocational nurses in particular is defined as what is customarily taught in a nursing program, if there are any representatives of a vocational nursing program that would like to speak to this issue, it would be very valuable input for the board.
I think they've left. Oh no, look, Dr. Rasveen is here. Dr. Rasveen, do you have any ideas that you'd like to share, or would you like to defer at the moment? Hey, sorry about that. You knew I was gonna.
All right, seeing no comments at this time, we will take a vote on this matter. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks? Yes. I'm Carol Mountain, I vote yes. The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you so much. So the second bill on the agenda that we wish to bring forth for discussion and possible action today is SB 1436. Now it's a very large bill. This is the Respiratory Care Board's sunset bill. And as such, it's very unusual, and I do want to make sure you know, it is very unusual for one board to comment on another board's sunset legislation. But it's also very unusual for one board to include language impacting another board in their sunset legislation. So we wrote the analysis to specifically address the area of concern, and by way of a little bit of history and background for the newer board members, the issue of LVN specifically treating patients who were dependent on, say, mechanical ventilation or other respiratory care support. This is an issue that's been of contention between ourselves and the Respiratory Care Board for, I would say 25, 30 years. And it's unfortunate too, because both boards have, of course, that same bottom line of we must protect the patient. So this particular piece of the bill is very interesting because it actually moves towards where we were working in 2019 before the onset of COVID, and that was our board had convened some work groups with RCB to talk specifically about those sometimes conflicting scopes and duties. It ended up that we first agreed to and then disagreed to a joint statement about where LVNs could and could not practice. When we disagreed, we basically revoked our participation in that joint statement. And then our board worked with a number of stakeholders and experts in the field, because it was and still is our position that this work must be done. There are thousands and thousands of patients in California who depend on the LVNs, and again, what's not mentioned again is the patients who depend on their psychiatric technicians as well, and that the total patient care is not centered on specific to respiratory care or the mechanical ventilation, but it encompasses that need for patient care, and that we all agreed that, don't you think it'd be good if they were completely trained and that training was standardized and regulated and accountable, that there were ongoing conversations, that this training was soundly developed and vetted by all the relevant professionals, respiratory care practitioners, doctors, nurses, and so this brings me to this section of this bill, because one thing that the Respiratory Care Board did agree is that to not allow LVNs to work in home health care settings was tantamount to removing a vast amount of patient care and jeopardizing thousands and thousands of lives. Nobody wants that. So it became this little area of contention, because our board's position has always been that it is not considered sound to say where a qualified licensed professional may or may not practice. It's always been our position that making those professionals as well trained as they possibly can be is more appropriate, and then the employers have that responsibility of making their appropriate hires and assignments. No employer, for example, would say, yeah, I could have an LVN doing a doctor's work or an RN's work. No reputable employer is going to do that. We need to make certain that this vaster world of patient care is able and experienced and trained. So I think, to speak to the specifics of this bill, I think it's a very good beginning, because it does specify that LVNs in home health care should be trained. Where this probably develops a few problems is in the fact that, one, it's so narrowly constructed. Again, it doesn't acknowledge that psychiatric technicians do this kind of work. I'm certainly developmentally delayed settings, in a variety of settings, and actually I think COVID has exacerbated that need. I think there is a need, I think, for that statewide requirement for all care facilities to provide this kind of training. That training must be done in conjunction with RCB. It must be developed by specialists in respiratory care. And this training should be a condition of employment. It should be, in fact, a condition of licensure to be a care facility. The standards for training, because what we found over the past several years was that the larger employers were providing training to their employees, and to most standards were doing a fine job. The problem, again, is that training was not standardized. It wasn't always built with that whole patient care approach. And the one problem that is really hard for any of us to address is the fact that the big reputable employers are going to do the right thing, but we all know that there are employers out in the shadows who say, don't need it, it's okay. And because it's hard to regulate that, there's no way for us to either ourselves or ask the Department of Public Health to regulate that, to enforce that. This is a problem. We think that if any training is developed and standardized and approved, it of course has to be regulated and enforced. One of the things that I know that we've discussed with our enforcement chief and others is the fact that the Respiratory Care Board rightly points out that there have been incidents, including patient deaths, where an LVN has not adequately cared for their patient, and that patient has either suffered or died. Having this training would hopefully fix that. Although I would say that it has been a long time since there were a lot of cases like this. I think the cases that the Respiratory Care Board has cited were quite a number of years old. But you know, I think as we move forward, I think it's important to note that this basic respiratory care is part of your basic LVN and psychiatric technician training, which means that it is well within their scope to be providing this basic care. Nobody is saying that any sort of quick training is going to equip them to be as good as proficient as a respiratory care practitioner. The job of LVNs and PTs in this scope, in this case, in that area of practice, is to make sure the patients are safe and comfortable, that if there is a real problem, that their patients can be kept alive long enough for a doctor, a respiratory care professional, to come and address that. So we do support the need for training, but we wanted to raise a few issues, and again, it's similar again to SB 994. We wouldn't want to certainly oppose this bill, but all the same, there are a number of issues because we think it's not complete. We think there's a lot of pieces missing from this bill. But I would remind you, just in the spirit of collegiality, that this time last year, our sunset bill was very, very sparsely worded. And of course, it's argued that it never really was completely well written. We have the obligation to move quickly, decisively, to suggest changes and additions and other refinements in this bill, but it needs to happen soon. This bill has been moved out of the Senate at this point and will be awaited hearing in the Assembly Business Professions, which is obviously the best place for us to have a meaningful conversation about changes. We've communicated with the RCB and with the department's legislative office and the director about moving forward, and all of us have agreed that it would be very appropriate and very desirable for us all to meet and discuss before the bill is heard in the assembly. So given that, the staff would recommend that, again, that the board authorize us to take a neutral position, but to work with, pardon me, with the author, but then to specifically work directly with the Assembly and the Senate's policy committees for business and professions to work on, I think, either developing in print, in bill language, a better training program, or to accept that we can move forward with home health care with the understanding that our board and RCB would work together to then address other employment settings. Because the one thing that I do know that has been changing, and certainly a lot over the past 2 years, is that, the understanding has been, prior to COVID, that there was a real clear delineation of where LVNs did and did not work. But we know over the past 2 years that more and more hospitals, acute care facilities, and other subacute facilities, residential care, have been looking at ways to better utilize LVNs and psych techs. And given that, again, it would be very short-sighted to set a real tight limitations on only home health care, only LVNs, only this. And the final point that I think is really important to mention is that the bill is silent on the duration of the training, and the way this bill is worded now, it's foreseeable that this could be entirely satisfied by the RCB developing just kind of a list of thou shalts and thou shalt nots, and giving it to the employers and letting them implement it. Again, this doesn't allow for regulation. It doesn't allow for oversight. It doesn't allow for, I think, a real patient-centric approach. The other thing that is concerning, and I know we had discussed this when we had this ad hoc group meeting, and that is everything changes so rapidly. And it's not like a licensure cert in IV or blood withdrawal. This is something that training or certification needs to be regular, like every other year or something, but it can't just be a one and done. And that would be another large concern that we would want to raise with the author and the committees. Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
That was very thorough and excellent. Thank you for sharing a little bit of the history that we've all seen unfolding. Are there any board discussion or questions? Oh wait, we need a motion first. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation to take a neutral position on SB 1436 and share concerns with the author and the members of the Assembly Business and Professions Committee? So moved. Thank you. Is there a second?
Abraham, I'll second.
Thank you. Any board discussion or questions? Okay, seeing no discussion or questions, any public comment? Okay, I see no one getting up for public comment. I would like to take a vote on this. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Yes.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
I'm Carol Mountain. I also vote yes. It is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Should we go back to number 8, which is what we skipped?
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
What time?
It's 11:20.
Just keep going. Rate. Continue with legend affairs.
Oh, let's finish legend.
Or if we take a short break, I would continue and do the regs.
Go ahead. All right, can we continue with the regs as part of number 9?
Good morning. I'm going to cover just the first item and the remaining 2 items, which would be the fee schedule, as well as 1536. I'm going to defer to
Counsel Christy Shields. We're so lucky to have you here today with us. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy and listen and learn with all the rest of us. So this is going to be really brief, and then I'll just settle in. This should be the last board meeting agenda that you have listing AB 2138 substantial relationship criteria. So as you know, and I've mentioned this before, we had different regulations council when those two packages were incepted, and they were split up. I'm not sure why, but they were. And so they actually moved through the process and were approved at two different times. Of course, we were implementing the provisions of the bill, so that wasn't an issue, but I'm happy to say that the vocational nursing package was approved, ironically, on April Fool's Day. So that concludes my update. Are there any questions? Okay.
So on the fee schedule rulemaking, our comment period, I believe, closed, was it the 5th or the 4th? April 4th?
I believe it was, that's a really good question.
I think it ended up being April 5th. But
I thought it was
April 4th, but then we were, at the end of the day, close of business on April 4th. So we didn't really know until April 5th whether we'd received any comments, and thankfully we did not receive any adverse comments. So this is an update just to let you know that we're preparing the final rulemaking package for submission to the Department of Consumer Affairs for final review, hopefully and approval. And we hope to file that package pretty soon. And we'll let you know and give you a status update at the next board meeting. On AB 1536, staff and I have been working really diligently to get that package together. We ended up drafting a greater than 40-page sort of a justification document for the emergency regulations, and these regulations would implement new school program approval process for the board for vocational schools of vocational nursing and for the preparation of psychiatric technicians. And it was a lot of work, but we got through it, and it has been submitted to the department for review and approval as of yesterday. So we're asking for expedited review. Hopefully, we hope to file it by the beginning of June with the Office of Administrative Law, and we'll let you know how that goes. We're crossing our fingers and hoping we get no adverse comments, because we would like to start implementing the requirements as soon as possible. And if it gets approved on an emergency basis, there will be plans to immediately begin a regular rulemaking process so that we will have more stakeholder outreach and input on these standards. Implementing particularly the forms for approval for both types of programs, and they were very extensive, if you saw at the last meeting. And we definitely want to get stakeholder input to find out how the schools view these new procedures and new forms. But we're real excited that we were able to get that done. It was a lot of work, and I thank Ms. Piers and Ms. Lyman in particular, and the nursing education consultants for their help on this work. It was a lot of work. So, any questions on either package? Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. So let's take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll go back to item 8, licensing and evaluations.
Okay.
And we're returning to number 8.
Correct.
All right, we are ready to
I call it my
go back to item 8, licensing and evaluations, report recommendations and possible actions.
It's online. I want to look.
Am I saying ad hoc committee? No.
Yes.
The ad hoc committee had no meeting and nothing to report. Licensing division report, Ms. Shelley Brown.
Hello. Yes, good morning, technically.
Is it still morning?
I'm going to take that off. Oh, God. So it was nice meeting with everyone yesterday and having the opportunity to talk about the licensing division. and our the licensing division and our functions and our processes. So the licensing division report is included in your packet, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do have a side note about the report. So at the time that I wrote the report, our intent was to resume the CE audits this month. However, after some review, we decided to temporarily postpone the CE audits just for the moment. So as I've reported previously in previous reports, the CE audits were suspended due to COVID-19, part of the governor's order, which included a temporary waiver of the CE requirement for individuals whose active licenses expired between March 31st, 2020 and October 31st, 2021. So the waiver was not extended after October. We are concerned that licensees aren't aware of this waiver not being extended. So what we're kind of just putting together a plan to better inform the licensees. We are going to place a notice on the website, a clear notice letting them know you need to do your continuing education. We also are talking about sending out an email notification to people with upcoming renewals. I'm going to be working on this next week because we do want to start the CE audits as soon as we can, but we don't want to start sending out audit letters to people and have them, our licensees, saying oh, I thought there was a waiver, and we're not trying to penalize people necessarily. We're just trying to make sure that they're following what they're supposed to be doing. And this will also give us an opportunity to fully review the CE audit process. When I started a month later, pandemic started, we stopped doing CE audits almost immediately. So this will kind of give us a chance, management and my supervisors, to really fully review the process, make sure everything is on the up and up, go over the letters, and maybe have another legal review of the letters that we send out, so that when Antoinette and the enforcement staff spend all this time, we actually provide the CE audits to enforcement if somebody isn't in compliance. So we don't want to waste staff's time, money, when maybe we haven't informed people, if they contest it, and I think it's the right thing for us to do. So we're going to review everything, cross-train our staff, and then hopefully start up CE audits sometime this summer once we feel like everything's good. Any questions?
I do have one. Okay. I noticed even in my own renewal process that when you upload or you say that you have taken your CEs to continue the education, that you don't have to really, I don't know, what was that? Do I have, the renewal, do you have to show the proof of the hours? I think it was something.
Well, I think it asks you to type in your courses.
To just type it in. The actual proof, no.
You don't have to actually provide any proof at that time. When we audit, it picks out a small percentage of people, and then if you get that audit letter, then you have to then provide your proof.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And then people, this waiver went on for a year and a half. So, and I know it's not. If you have to go to the DCA webpage, the waiver page, and there are a lot of waivers on there, and you have to look through them, and you have to really be on top of it. And so I think us kind of trying to educate them, putting it on our website, clear, I was look at this, read this, it's important.
I think that's fair. Since you're putting it out there for the person who holds the
right, and then
license.
And if they're not in compliance, they could potentially be getting fined. So I want to make sure
that you put that out there.
Yes.
And then it's a responsibility of everyone to make sure that they are accountable to.
Correct.
That's right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move to item 10, enforcement, report recommendations and possible actions. Mr. Maxey, chairperson, Ms. Rooks, board member, enforcement division report, Ms. Wood.
Good afternoon. My name is Antoinette Wood. I'm the Enforcement Division Chief. You do have my Enforcement Division report in your packet. Please let me know if you have any questions about that. I would like to highlight that we are still under 1,000 complaints, which historically for the board is pretty impressive. We are closing complaints at an appropriate rate. I will say that COVID-19 is still slightly affecting us, as the majority of our complaints include criminal cases from our subsequent arrest reports for our licensees. Court cases are still slow. There is still a backlog. We are staying diligent on those, and we hope to make some more progress as soon as the courts really fully reopen and clear their backlog. We hope to see a good little clearing of those cases. Did anybody have any questions or concerns?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enforcement committee report, Mr. Maxey.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Ms. Wood and her team for everything that they do to decrease the numbers that have been significant over the past years, but definitely under her leadership, they've done a really good job to decrease that number. So today I will report on the petitioner hearings as previously requested by the board for an update. The summary is of the following. The board has heard petitions for early termination probation, also ETP, modification of probation, and reinstatements at its board meetings for decades. Previously, one day of each board meeting dedicated to hearings 8 petitions. During the pandemic, in 2020, the number of petitions was limited to 5 per board meeting, and the demand for the petition hearings increased. Petitioners were required to have their petitions heard in a highly public venue and submit themselves to direct questioning by the board members. Following the petitioners' hearings, the board discussed the cases in closed session, and a decision granting or denying each petition was eventually issued. Overall, the process is inefficient, and in regard to the time and expense involved, this denies some individuals the opportunity to have their petition heard in a timely manner. And this is not in line with their disciplinary hearing conducted. Any questions or comments on any of that from the rest of the board members? All the other discipline hearings are heard by the Office of Administrative Hearing, also known as OAH, directly. The basic process involves board staff forwarding the applicable cases to case documents to the Office of the Attorney General, also known as OAG, who coordinates a mutually convenient hearing date between their office, the respondent, and OAH. The hearings are near the respondent's residence. Following the hearings, the proposed decisions by the administrative law judge, also known as ALJ, are received and voted on by the board members. By updating the petitioner hearing process, we afford the petitioners the same opportunity to be heard as others in disciplinary hearings. The current process. Currently, all petitioner hearings are sent to OAH to be heard. This decision was made at the February 2021 special board meeting. Since then, all 60 original petitioners have been heard by OAH. Had we made this decision, more than 90 petitioners would still be waiting to be heard, and hearings would be scheduled out to 2025. If there's no other comments from my colleagues, I just want to commend again Ms. Wood and her team for everything that you're doing around this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Appreciate it. Are we ready to move to 11? Okay. Item 11, discussion and possible action to approve new quarterly newsletter. Ms. Ball, Board Administrative Assistant. Analyst, apologize.
Thank you, Dr. Mountain. In your board packet, there was for agenda item 11, the BVMPT newsletter concept fact sheet that I put together for the board. When I started here, the executive officer expressed her desire to have a newsletter for our stakeholders, just to be able to share information in a clear, concise manner with them and just have more communication and be more transparent with what the board is doing throughout the year. So on the sheet, there's a background, there's a visual concept. Again, the concept, as noted, is not what it will look like. This was created by me. We are actually we would like to use and have your direction to use the publishing, design, and editing division of DCA. It is incorporated in our pro rata, so we do believe it is the most fiscally responsible way of creating this quarterly newsletter for our stakeholders. Each newsletter will be clear, concise, and to the point overviews from every division of what is going on. Any, licensing could have, put in that the waiver for CE was not extended and, is now you're back to normal, had the newsletter been there. The board has not had a newsletter in over 10 years, and it was an annual newsletter, one a year. That was a very long newsletter, and PDE does newsletters for other DCA boards, and so they're actually very good at their job. Elaine has a few examples for you guys from the boards that I did list on the fact sheet. And these newsletters, it's just the first few pages so that you can see how robust and how beautiful, really, that these newsletters are that the division creates. These newsletters that you're seeing, though, are anywhere from 17 to 41 pages long. That is not what BVMPT is proposing at this time. We would like it, again, to be short and concise, beautiful to the eye. They're getting the information, and it will include links to our website, teaching and showing our stakeholders how to use our website and ensuring that our website stays useful to the stakeholders. And again, just really being more transparent and communicative, and allowing that attention span to grow. And potentially maybe one day it's more than quarterly, but at this time, following a board meeting would kind of be the direction we're looking for, so that there can be an overview of actions that were taken at the board meeting that came before the newsletter distribution. So, were there any questions? Yes.
Just a comment. Thank you. I think this is a fantastic thing that you'll be putting together. I would only ask that we would highlight, if possible, students from time to time, as well as the colleges, because I think that they need to get some due credit for all the work that they're doing, and it's also inspiring. I think for a later day, hopefully, we will try to figure out how do we get more young people inspired by maybe going to our website that are not, maybe they're in K through 12. So let's try to figure that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
I really like this. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I really like this newsletter. I think it will help people feel inclusive because I don't know how long you follow the board or LVN classifications for PTs, but for a long time we felt, and I can say we because I hold a license, excluded of sorts, because it's always, I think Elaine referenced it today where, they, about LVNs and where they, you don't want to tell them where to practice and where they belong and how they fit in. And I think there's a degree of anxiety around LVN classifications not feeling inclusive or important enough to be in a newsletter. So I really appreciate a newsletter like this. And I know tons of LVNs that I even know, right? And, or however many that we have, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't even know that number. But would appreciate something like this, and I agree with Mr. Maxey. Maybe taking a look to see what else we can include that someone would be interested in reading in the newsletter, and I appreciate it. Would it come out? You said quarterly, but is the idea that it's electronic? We're not mailing.
No, it is not going to be mailed. Not
I was
no.
gonna say, I don't know. Is that in the budget under miscellaneous?
So as it stands now, when we noticed this meeting, we have it's in here. We have listservs of hundreds, if not thousands, of email addresses, and that number increases every single day with applications that come in, especially now that it is required that they submit an email address. And those listservs, you can go to our website and actually sign up for the listservs. So anytime we have a public meeting, our rulemaking packages, an email is sent out to those listservs, and it is a link to the website where we hold the materials or the notice. And so this would be that same kind of concept that, it would go out and they would click on the link and it would go to the web page for the newsletter. And that's a way we can track, because we have the analytics to see how many people are going to that web page. And then when they go to the web page, they can look at the newsletter. And again, if it's something, oh, that's really interesting, they can click on the link and go to the web page that has more information, so that they can dig a little deeper if they're interested. But the newsletter itself will have all the very specific, pertinent information that is key for them to take away from it.
That's wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
This is something we had discussed earlier, Vicki. So I support this wholeheartedly. I need to leave. I didn't want to be rude and just walk out in the middle of your presentation,
Well,
so
thank
I
you, Ms. Carpenter.
apologize. But yes, I support this completely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can we get
If we need a motion, I make the motion.
Okay. Thank you. We need a motion to approve and a second to approve the staff recommendation for this newsletter.
I'll make that. Was the motion made?
Yes.
Carpenter made that motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Excellent. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? Ms. Carpenter, can I get your vote before you leave?
Yes. Yes.
Good, got it. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Gerking?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey?
Absolutely.
Ms. Rooks?
Yes.
And I enthusiastically say yes as well. I'm Carol Mountain. That is a unanimous vote for that.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you for the great idea. All right, item 12, 2019 Psychiatric Technicians Occupational Analysis. We have a special guest from the DCA Office of Professional Examination Services, Dr. Heidi Lenser and Ms. Sonia German-Perez, who will present the occupational analysis. That is awesome.
Thank you so much.
I have to share. Hello, everyone. My name is Sonia German-Perez, and I work for the Office of Professional Examination Services. I'm a research data specialist.
And I'm Heidi Lenser. I'm the chief of the Office of Professional Examination Services.
And we're here to present the occupational analysis that we did in 2019 for the psychiatric technicians. We found out this morning when we showed up for the meeting that the projector is not available. So let's do this low tech, good old fashioned way with paper. So my presentation today will start with providing some general information about OPS, Office of Professional Examination Services, and its role at DCA. We will also include a quick reference to the laws technical standards, and professional guidelines that guide the work performed by OPS. We will then discuss the purpose of licensure examinations and how occupational analyses support the licensure examination development. Next, we will talk about the steps we took to conduct the 2019 occupational analysis of the psych tech profession. And finally, we will present the results of that occupational analysis. We're on slide 3 at this point. So in terms of, let's talk a little bit, just very briefly, about the Office of Professional Examination Services, or OPS. OPS serves as an internal resource for the Department of Consumer Affairs for all matters related to licensure examinations. We provide professional consulting services in examination development and validation to DCA's boards, bureaus, and committees. And this includes developing examinations, conducting occupational analysis and other types of research studies to support examination validity, performing reviews of national examinations for use in California, and consulting on a variety of professional testing topics. As an independent objective entity, OPS also provides recommendations based on legal requirements, professional guidelines, and technical standards that are related to licensure exams. And so let's talk about the laws and standards that guide licensure examination programs and all the work we do at OPS. So about 20 years ago, more than that probably, the Business and Professions Code Section 139 was passed by the legislature. And this law had several requirements. First of all, that the boards, bureaus, committees that administer licensure examinations conduct an occupational analysis and conduct examination validation studies. They also have to submit a report to the legislature every year on the status of these occupational analyses and examination development. The section also required OPS to develop a validation policy, examination validation policy for DCA licensing programs. And this DCA policy establishes the standards for educational and psychological testing and the principles for the validation and use of personnel selection procedures as the authoritative documents that are used in order to assess and develop examination programs and licensure examinations. These standards and principles are not specific to California. They apply in all settings where testing is done. And in particular, we use them in relation to licensure examinations. Purpose of licensure examinations, well, because these laws, standards, and guidelines are critical to the decisions that are made based on examination scores, we want to make sure that those licensure decisions that are made based on the scores are valid, and therefore the examination must provide a reliable method for identifying practitioners who are able to practice safely and competently. So how do we accomplish this? For licensure exams, the main source of validity is what we called content-related validity. It comes from evidence that the examination content is directly linked to the content of the profession. This means that exams should be directly linked to the tasks performed by psychiatric technicians at entry level and the knowledge required to perform those tasks safely and competently. Therefore, the focus is on entry-level tasks and knowledge important for public protection. Additionally, we always use, and this is what the standards require, that the exam content subject matter experts are used in order to make sure that the exam content reflects the practice, the work that is being done during all aspects of the exam development. So let's talk about the cycle of exam development very briefly. It begins with the occupational analysis study, which then results in a description of practice in California. This description of practice is then organized into an examination outline that identifies major areas of practice and the entry-level critical competencies that are required to practice safely and competently. This is done through an occupational analysis that is usually conducted every 5 to 7 years, and this is also part of the DCA policy that's been developed by OPS. We will also talk more about what occupational analysis are in a little bit. The next step in examination development is then item or question writing. So now that we have an examination outline based on the description of the profession, we can go ahead and write the questions, or subject matter experts can. And these new questions are then, this is the way we ensure that the critical entry-level competencies are what is being tested on the exam. And the next step is to review these questions by one or more additional panels of subject matter experts in item review. Also, any items that are returned from pre-testing, they're used on a test as non-operational items, they would also be reviewed by these panels as well and tried again. Next, subject matter panels review constructed examination forms for content criteria. So we would construct the exams using statistical criteria and then bring a group of experts to make sure that the content is current, relevant, reflects current practice, well-balanced, mainstream, and critical for entry level. Finally, subject matter panels also participate in standard setting studies designed to set a criterion reference passing score for the exam. And the criterion for the examination, licensure examination, is what we call the minimum competence criterion, so that any person who is minimally competent can pass the examination. In terms of the purpose of occupational analyses, as we already mentioned, establish that link between the test content and the job content, so that the test tests what is actually being done in the job of the psychiatric technician. An occupational analysis is a comprehensive, systematic study of the profession that provides a description of current practice. It identifies critical entry-level tasks and essential knowledge required for safe and competent performance of those tasks. And for this reason, the occupational analysis can typically be the basis of not only job-related fair licensure examinations, but also can be used for legislation and policy development. And so now that we covered some of the general terms that relate to occupational analyses and licensure exam testing, let's talk about the 2019 occupational analysis process. We started by researching the psychiatric technician profession and conducting telephone interviews with subject matter experts to obtain information about tasks performed by psychiatric technicians in California and the knowledge required to perform those tasks. Next, we brought in two focus groups of licensed psychiatric technicians who are currently practicing at that time, and each doing a separate 3-day workshop in Sacramento to further develop and refine the list of tasks and knowledge statements describing the profession. And we then incorporated the task and knowledge statements into a web-based survey so that the population, the sample of licensees that was chosen to receive the survey can rate these tasks and knowledges. Once the survey closed, data were analyzed and the results were reviewed and confirmed with subject matter experts. The subject matter experts also developed the final content outline for the California Psych Tech licensing exam. In terms of the sample that was used, the occupational analysis survey was emailed to licensees in July 2019. OPS, on behalf of the board, emailed an invitation to complete the survey questionnaire to 2,079 actively licensed psych techs with a California address on file with the board. Two important points to make here are that this sample was approximately 23% of the total population at that time of psychiatric technicians, which was 9,057 at the time, and the population was defined as all actively licensed psych techs in California with the California address on file with the board. We do not include in the sample anyone who has an address outside of California. Several weeks after The survey was launched. Reminder emails were sent by the board through subscriber alerts, and then also by our office to everyone who received the survey. The board also posted the link to the survey on their website and sent a subscriber alert announcing the survey. The survey software registered a total of 825 logins to the survey. This includes anyone who may have opened the survey through email, alert, or directly from the board's website. The final sample size included in the data analyses was 486, or 23% of the sample. In terms of the population, this includes 5% of the actively licensed psych techs population in California. And this response rate reflects two adjustments. First, to ensure that the results reflect current practice in California, OPS excluded data from respondents who indicated that they were not currently licensed and working as a psych tech in California, because the whole goal is to identify tasks, current task and current practice. We want practitioners to be practicing at the time they're taking the survey. And the second, OPS also excluded responses that did not provide any ratings for task statements. So some people would just complete a partial survey, for example, demographic data, and then quit on us. In terms of the survey, the first section is typically the demographic questions. So the first section includes questions that help us describe the respondents in terms of their relevant professional characteristics. These include, but are not limited to, education and training, work experience, work setting, geographic location, and we will talk about those in more detail. This information provides important context for interpreting results. So we will look at the demographic results first. On the next slide, you can see the number of years working as a licensed psych tech in California. We asked the respondents to tell us how many years they've worked as a licensed psych tech in California, and it indicates that psych techs with different experience levels was similarly represented in the final samples. As you can see, all these chunks of the pie look pretty similar. Most importantly, though, entry-level licensees with up to 5 years of experience were well represented at 29%. Again, licensure exams are focused on entry-level tasks and knowledge required for safe performance and public protection. And out of this, the entire portion, 7% were licensed at 12 months or less, so pretty new to the job, which is also important. Okay, turning to the hours per week working as a psych tech slide, and when they were asked about hours per week that they work as a licensed psych tech, the great majority of respondents indicated that they worked 40 or more hours. So if you look at the slide and you add these two that are above 40, it adds up to about 86%. Within those, close to a quarter of respondents indicated working 50 or more hours per week. Okay. In terms of the typical shift, about half of the respondents indicated that they work the day shift. In addition, about 24% chose the evening shift as their answer, and 30% chose the night shift. Variable shift was reported by about 7% of respondents. Okay, moving on to the typical shift length. How they responded to this, the most common answer was 8 hours, with 81% of the respondents choosing this option. Some respondents, about 10%, also noted working longer shifts, 10 or 12 hours. And this is, as far as my memory serves, typical for this population, and has shown itself to be the case over the last few times we did the OA. In terms of the current employer, 72%, so more than 2/3 of respondents indicated they worked for the state government. Also not surprising. with next largest groups being private for profit at 10% and city and or county government and private not for profit employers at 8% each. In terms of the primary work location, over 2/3 of respondents at 70%, 69% to be exact, indicated that their primary practice setting was in an urban area, and only about 30% work in rural areas. Also, I think this is something that we see across the profession, so it's not unusual. Highest level of education achieved. On the next slide, we asked the respondents what was the highest level of education they achieved, and 47% of them indicated completing a psych tech program. Another 31% reported having an associate degree, and 40% reported having a bachelor's degree. There was a small number of respondents, 2.5% reported having a master's degree, and then a 0.2% a doctorate degree. Because licensure can also be achieved by completing an alternative pathway, we also see less than about 1% of licensees who reported completion of a high school or equivalent education as their highest level of education. So they might have entered through an alternative pathway. Number of staff supervised, we see that more than half of the respondents, 53%, report not supervising other staff. About 11.5% indicated that they supervise 16 or more individuals, with about 35% supervising between 1 and 15 individuals. Okay. In terms of primary work setting, and please keep in mind that this is pre-pandemic, so we literally completed the study right before the pandemic hit, and the report was turned over to the board in February, I believe, 2020. In terms of primary work setting, almost 1/3 of respondents indicated working in long-term psychiatric settings, with acute psychiatric and correctional or detention settings each being chosen by approximately 17% of the respondents. And looking at the data from 2014, the most significant change, so I looked back to see what is happening here. The most significant change appears to be the increase in the long-term psychiatric settings from approximately 18.7% to 31.5%. And then there's a decrease in long-term developmental disability settings from 16 to 6%. And I think for those of you who are in the profession probably do not find that surprising given the changes that have occurred in terms of the facilities closing. So this was captured right during 2019. Acute psychiatric and correctional or detention settings remain approximately the same over time between 2014 and 2019. Okay. Moving on to the client age question that we asked. So when we asked the respondents what age groups they most commonly work with, and please note that here we asked them to indicate or select all that apply, so they could choose more than one. So this stuff will not add up to 100%, right? So in terms of the age groups, client age groups, they 88% of respondents indicated working with adult clients, 45% with young adults, 36% with older adults, and very few also chose adolescents, approximately 6.4%, infants and children, 2.5%, and newborns, 0.4%. So they do have psych techs work with all age groups. I think that's an important takeaway here. And in terms of the examination content usually reflects this in terms of the percentages. So you will not see many questions on pediatrics or newborns, and you will see quite a few on adult populations. Most common client diagnosis indicated by respondents was a dual diagnosis of mental illness and substance abuse, with another 33% of respondents indicating that the most common client diagnosis is a mental illness diagnosis. And then you see some combinations there: mental illness and developmental disability, about 8%, developmental disability only 2.9%, and this is a drastic change from years past, quite a while back, I should say. And then we have substance abuse in itself, just 1.6%. Okay. In terms of respondents by region and how the population was distributed across California, geographic representativeness shows that the most respondents chose counties in the Riverside and its vicinity at 32%. And then next largest area chosen by respondents was in San Joaquin Valley, 23%, LA County and vicinity, 19%, San Francisco Bay Area 11%, South and Central Coast 7%, and Sacramento Valley 4%. We have smaller percentages also, mostly north, and then San Diego County and vicinity. In comparison to 2014 data, the biggest change was for the Riverside and vicinity area, which was 5th largest before, and had approximately 11% of respondents choosing it as the place of their primary practice. And now it's the most chosen region by respondents, so it jumped last time we did this in 2014 from the 5th place at 11% to the 1st place at 32%. In contrast, the South and Central Coast decreased from about 15% in 2014 to 7% in 2019. The remainder were approximately within small ranges, a small range of percentage points. Okay, and that basically concludes the demographic portion in terms of what our respondents looked like in terms of demographics. The next part of the survey asked the respondents to look at the task ratings and rate them in terms of frequency and importance. So after they were asked to rate the task statements in terms of how frequently do you perform this task in your current work, and the importance, how important is this task for effective performance in your current work. And both of these ranged from 0 to 5, 0 being does not apply, and then for frequency, the highest rating was very often at 5, and for importance, the highest rating was critically important at 5. So using these ratings, the respondents rated the tasks. Once the survey was offline, we actually we analyzed these ratings and then brought in a group of subject matter experts. It was a 3-day workshop, and that looked at these, reviewed all these ratings. So they would look at the order of tasks in terms of frequency, then they would look at it in terms of importance, to evaluate what tasks are more or less important or more frequently done, and get a good grip on that information. And then we also multiplied the task frequency and task importance ratings to arrive at what we call the criticality index. And then they also looked at ratings of criticality as well. And based on evaluation of ratings, a subject matter expert determines that certain tasks were more critical for entry-level practice than others, but all tasks were kept. We sort of go through a weeding out process in the very beginning, so this is also not surprising. The subject matter experts also made sure that the knowledge required for performance of each critical entry-level task was identified and linked to that task. And finally, they confirmed the final organization of tasks and knowledge into content areas on the examination outline, and determined the final content area weights by reviewing the survey criticality data. And this is what we came up with as a group based on the criticality information that they got from the survey. Final ratings were, they're shown in the examination content outline summary. So you will see each content area with sub areas, breakdown, and then the weight percentage, so how many questions on the exam are from each content area. As you can see, basic nursing care, including basic assessment intervention, is about 23%. And going back to 2014, and this was a little bit higher, I think it was, let's see, the weight percentage was 23, so it stayed the same in 2014. 27 in 2014 to 23 in 2019. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes here. And then 2006, this basic nursing assessment was actually much higher at 39%. So this may also have something to do with the change in the settings in which the psych techs work over the last 20 years. The next area, area 2, is participation in treatment plan development and evaluation. It's a smaller area, you see 5% there, and this encompasses treatment plan development, evaluation, client education, and discharge planning topics. We then move on to the area 3 at administration of care, and this is subdivided into supervision and management, and then safe living environment. This entire area is about 6% of the exam. Legal and professional responsibilities is 14% of the exam, and topics included in this area include client rights, informed consent, scope of practice, professional conduct, ethics, and others. In terms of area 5, this is medications, and is subdivided into medication assessment and evaluation, medication administration, and then also medication documentation. Medications area is 17% of the exam. Number 6 is psychosocial assessment and intervention. So this is also a very large area, right there in line with the basic nursing, subdivided into psychosocial assessment and then intervention and evaluation, and this is 22% of the exam. And a very last but not least, behavior management, which is one of the main parts of the psych tech job, something that they're highly skilled in, is behavior management, and this is 13% of the exam. It's subdivided into ongoing behavior management and then crisis management. Overall, there are some changes, as I indicated, with the basic nursing assessment sort of dropping in weight since the early 2000s to now. As far as I could tell from the records, the psychosocial assessment is maintaining its weight at about 22%. Medications, it remains similar as well. And we are not able to assess the changes in all of them because some organization has changed over the years. But those are the main ones, the staples that basically keep stay overall over the years. And moving on to the final, let's talk about the examination update. And so this content outline was implemented in 2021 in February examinations. Important information here is that before any candidate signed up for the examination, there was this new examination, they would receive the updated candidate information bulletin from PSI. And so they knew about any changes in the content. Overall, though, the content pretty much remains the same. There were no significant changes except that the movements in particular topics awaits, if that makes sense. And at this point, I wanted to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present this information to the board and to conduct this project in 2019 in collaboration with the board. And Heidi and I are more than happy to take your questions at this point, if there are any.
I want to ask a question. Thank you for this comprehensive report and analysis. Question around the diversity of the sample size that you were within the demographics. It doesn't denote who with the sample size. And so just curious if that information is available, or is that something that we will be considering for future analysis, because I think it's really key as we do this work to identify those particular groups, as well as if they're multilingual in their as for the clients, as well as for those that are being questioned.
Excellent question. So the board has traditionally been very intent on sending out to the entire population of licensees. I think the last time, to be more, let's say, fiscally conservative, the decision, I believe, on the board side was made, and this would be probably better answered by the board, for what reason we went with the email convenience sample, so that there's no printing involved. To make sure that we are doing our due diligence, we did look at the proportions of demographics across the particular demographic characteristics that we do follow, like geographic location and let me look at that graph again. Year's license. Those are two that we traditionally really care about in licensure. We want to make sure that we get a good representative sample at minimum in those two areas. And that is the information that the board has. So the board only has the geographic location of the respondents, and I believe the board has the location of the years licensed. So we looked at those, and those proportions were similar in the convenience sample as they were in the total population sample. And possibly, and this is complete speculation on my end, but seeing this across the boards, as the board is collecting the emails, this has started, I don't know exactly when for this board you've started collecting emails, but it usually happens that people are updating their email address or providing it to the board as they renew their license. There is some sort of randomness to how, because randomness is the key point that we worry about, right? That we're not in some way biasing the sample. So those are things that we were able to do and to support the decision made by the board to go with the email only sample. You're welcome.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Were you going to speak?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Board Member Maxey kind of took some of the words out of my mouth. However, I just wanted to ask, usually sample sizes are really good at about 10%. And so I was wondering, I know that we've reached about 5, right?
23% for the sample that was sent out. So 23%.
So it was actually 23%
of what was sent out. Overall, I wanted to give you an idea of the population, how much that is, and that's 5% of the total population of actively licensed.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Okay, because I know that this was done, as you pointed out, pre-pandemic, and I know that I don't know if we'd ever get out of the pandemic, but however, we're still here, like almost 3 years into it. Are you going to, and I know you mentioned that usually when people that hold the licenses are updating online, are you hoping to do this again in the future? Are you going to base what you're trying to do here on 2019? Not everybody really looks at their emails either, so there's a whole lot of things to why people don't respond. But is this something that you're going to do again when we get the contact information? Because you mentioned contact information, and that's a really good point.
Yes, so our intent, and I think the board's intent, is always to include everyone. I will support that decision in all ways possible and from our perspective. And I have to say the board worked very hard to achieve that percentage rate, with follow-ups and the board posting on their website and the subscriber alerts and totally, so Section 139, Business and Professions Code, Section 139 requires the board to conduct these studies every 5 to 7 years at minimum.
5 to 7 years. Okay.
Yeah, at minimum. And then if there is significant changes or concerns about changes in the profession that would, affect the minimum, sort of not minimum, but entry level practice and competence, then we would definitely want to do this sooner. So from that perspective, yes, studies will happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And your board has been excellent in following up. They did a study in 2014, 2019. So the expectation is that this will continue, and they're diligent about this stuff.
And I just wanted to add, just to give you some perspective, most of our studies because we're doing this same type of study for other boards and yours, most of the response rates are around 10%. So have 23% of the sample respond. That's great. And they got CEs? Did they get CEs?
I don't think so.
Okay. Sometimes we try to give incentive by, if a board's regulations allow to get CEs for this type of project, we do that to incentivize. If we got that without CEs, I'm very impressed.
Very impressive. Yeah.
I have one quick question. You may not know the answer. It's just my trying to put this in perspective. I know that there's not a lot of other states that have that designation of psychiatric technician. Is California the only state using the PSI test? So it's only for our psych techs right now.
Yes, it's developed in California by the board.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Since
we may set a standard. Who knows? I know other states are looking to see what we're doing. So
Of the other two states that have this category, this profession, I recall that at least one of them has asked to borrow our exam.
Yes.
I like that, borrow. Well, thank you so much. That was very interesting.
I just have a couple comments, if I may.
Yeah.
Wonderful presentation. And I find a couple very interesting takeaways as far as the current workforce licensee population. The number of current licensees who practiced between 0 and 5 years is approximately the same, 29%, as 11 to 20%. So that indicates to me that there's a relatively stable workforce across the number of working years. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The other takeaway is it appears, and I was very surprised to see that the most populated area of practice is in the Riverside area, which is not the most populated area in the state of California. LA, much, much larger.
Mm-hmm.
But it indicates to me that there are certain niche groups, especially in perhaps the LA region, and especially in Northern California, that continue to be underserved.
Yes.
So I find that very interesting. The other thing I would like to know is, as far as educational attainment, highest level of education achieved is one of the questions. I'd be very interested to know, among the licensee respondents, what kind of program was attended and completed in order to get certification. In other words, was it a private or a public setting? And even within public, we have ROP and community college programs. And then, of course, we have proprietary. And what we've seen over the years, the first programs for both psych techs and VNs were sponsored really by the state of California at the community college level. And what I've seen among our workforce, exceedingly resilient, very compassionate and hardworking people. And in the interest of promoting a more diverse workforce, it may become I would really love to see a legislative priority about increased funding for community colleges, which would give a broader access of people entering into the profession. So that's what I'd like to say. Thank you very much. Very, very informative.
Thank you.
Actually, if I could provide a little footnote to that, if I'm not mistaken, and the NECs will correct me, there are about 13 or 14 schools in California for psych techs, and I believe that only 1 or 2 of them are private. And that may or may not change in the next couple of years while we are expanding the number of programs and accelerating the program approval, but generally speaking, it's almost completely opposite from LVN programs, which are about 70% private programs.
Interesting. Yeah, we can definitely add that next time we do the survey, get some
Thank
more
you very
detailed
much.
information.
That'd be much appreciated.
And I was going to say, I think the Riverside being so high, I think Patton State Hospital is one of the few state hospitals that still remained open. And so that might be one of the reasons that we see that high number there. I was embarrassed by Sacramento's numbers. It's abysmal. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you for
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
Yes.
All right, item 13, public comment on items not on the agenda. Please note, the board may not discuss or take any action on any item raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. There's not many people left.
I would have a public comment, if I may.
Certainly.
Yeah. Not only have has this pandemic experience really revealed something about the resiliency of our licensee population, but also staff. And I'd like to draw a distinction between somebody who dreams and somebody who's a real visionary. And so not only has staff been very exceedingly hardworking, day in and day out, mostly from the office, but I'd like to give a shout out to Elaine, our executive officer,
Yes.
because it was through her vision that she identified a critical need among her staff. And that is truly the definition of a visionary leader. And that was, it was noted that perhaps some folks are kind of struggling during the pandemic, as many of us, have, some of us in different ways. But she, on her own initiative, created this pantry option for staff. Whoever needs a hand, come on in, and we're going to offer that. And that's the kind of exemplary service that really is a hallmark of the wonderful leadership that Elaine has given. So I'd like to thank Elaine and all those staff who assisted.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think we all echo that sentiment on the board. Thank you so saying that so well and really putting that out there.
It really just allows me another opportunity to shop.
Thank you.
Item 14, suggestions for future agenda items. Anyone?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I want to do an update on the proposed programs and how everything's going after the emergency regulations. Perhaps by the next board meeting, they will have already hit, and we may already have some new letter of intents from proposed programs. And these may be from programs we've never heard of. So I would like to see that maybe as a continued agenda item, because this is always going to be a huge issue for the board. Not so much an issue, but a topic for the board. So I think just
That's a good point.
keep going with this one. We want to hear what's going on. I'd love to hear from the NECs, and you kind of asked them about that yesterday, like what are you seeing? What are some of your challenges? So I think that's really important for the NECs to tell you what's going on, because you voted to move all of this forward in our emergency regulations. So, based on your vote and their work, everybody's working together. So I would just love to see it as an ongoing item.
I think that's a good idea. I do too, and what I hear you say is that you're going to be visiting the board meetings even after your retirement. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for those words.
Nicely played.
That was good. All right. Without further ado, I guess we will do item 15, which is adjournment. And I want to thank everyone for your participation and for the last 2 days and everybody being here and all the things we've gotten accomplished. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.